Chapter 721. What the Azure Forest Trisect is Seeking. No, senior brother, I wasn't lazy. Mo Yu was instantly worried when he heard Duan Lingtian and spoke out hurriedly, as if he was deeply afraid that Duan Lingtian would be disappointed with him. If you don't believe me, you can ask Marshal and Qin Shang. Mo Yu has indeed not been lazy, and with the cultivation environment of the stalactite cave, he has already broken through to the 5th level of the void prying stage. Qin Shang smiled as she spoke to Duan Lingtian. I was just joking. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but shake his head and smile when he saw Mo Yu react so intensely. Actually, early on when he first glanced at Mo Yu, his spiritual force had already detected Mo Yu's current cultivation, and he knew that Mo Yu was already a 5th level void prying stage martial artist. Even though Mo Yu's improvement was extremely inferior when compared to his, but as things were now, amongst the younger generation of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, only he, Zishang, and Long Yun had surpassed Mo Yu. Even if it was the other genius martial artists amongst the 5 great young masters like Crazy Young Master, Sword Young Master, and Flame Young Master, they didn't have such achievements when they were around Mo Yu's age. If the sect leader was still alive, he would surely be extremely gratified from seeing your current accomplishments. Duan Lingtian seemed to have recalled something, and he sighed. For a time, the atmosphere became silent and heavy. After a short moment, Qin Shang broke this silent atmosphere. You asked about the Azure Forest Trisect earlier. Up until now, we still don't know the reason the Azure Forest Trisect formed into one. But the experts of the Azure Forest Trisect swarmed out 4 months ago and arrived at our 7-star sword sect. Duan Lingtian's brows raised. What did they come here for? Could it be that they wanted to set up the Azure Forest Trisect here? As he finished speaking, cold lights flickered within Duan Lingtian's eyes. No, they seemed to be looking for something. Moreover, their group only ascended the main peak of our 7-star sword sect, Dubi Peak. Qin Shang shook her head and continued. During that period of time, I and Elder Peng had once wanted to go find out what actually was going on, yet we were stopped. Fortunately, Elder Peng's speed far surpassed them. Otherwise, it would be difficult for me and Elder Peng to escape from them. Have they left now? Duan Lingtian asked. He'd directly come to the peak of Megrez Peak after arriving at the 7-star sword sect, so he didn't know of the situation on Dubi Peak. Yes, they've left. Qin Shang nodded. They stayed on Dubi Peak for 3 months, and they just left a month ago. With me and Elder Peng present, they didn't dare just leave people here. So besides me and Mo Yu, there's usually no one else on the 7 great sword peaks of our 7-star sword sect. They've been bustling about for 3 months. Could it be that they're scheming something? Duan Lingtian frowned. I and Elder Peng went to look at Dubi Peak after they left, yet we didn't notice any clues, said Qin Shang. I want to go take a look, said Duan Lingtian. When Duan Lingtian turned around, he instead noticed that he'd forgotten Feng Tianwu at the side, and he was instantly slightly embarrassed. He hurriedly introduced Qin Shang, Elder Peng, and Mo Yu to Feng Tianwu. Tianwu, this is Peak Master Qin Shang, a senior of my sect. This is Elder Peng, the sect-guarding revered elder of our 7-star sword sect. As for him, he's my junior brother Mo Yu. Peak Master Qin Shang, Elder Peng. Feng Tianwu hurriedly greeted these 2 seniors, and her words were slightly respectful. Nice to meet you. In the end, Feng Tianwu looked at Mo Yu and lightly smiled as she greeted him. This is. Qin Shang looked at Feng Tianwu and revealed a surprised expression. In terms of appearance, the woman before her wasn't the slightest bit inferior to her personal disciple, Ke. Moreover, unlike Ke's beautiful and humble bearing, the woman before her stood there and naturally emitted an aura that caused her to obviously seem like someone of extraordinary birth. She's called Feng Tianwu, and she's a friend of mine. Duan Lingtian smiled as he introduced her. Elder Peng nodded lightly, yet Mo Yu's gaze lit up instead as he glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian before saying via voice transmission. Senior brother, this ought to be another sister-in-law of mine, right? FK off. What nonsense are you speaking? Duan Lingtian glared angrily at Mo Yu as he replied via voice transmission. Qin Shang greeted Feng Tianwu, and with a single glance, she discerned that Feng Tianwu had feelings for Duan Lingtian, causing her to be unable to refrain from sighing in her heart. Ke, your man is really good at chasing after women, but his remarkableness is indeed sufficient to attract many outstanding women to fall for him. At this moment, Qin Shang couldn't help but think in her heart. If I was another 20 years younger, Would I also be moved by this violet-clothed young man before me? She didn't dare guarantee this. If it was during that time when she was young and she encountered such a remarkable man, she believed that she'd probably have no ability to resist. But unfortunately, during the time she was young, even the most outstanding man by her side wasn't much stronger than her. Where's senior brother Jung Song? After standing at the side of the peak of Megre's Peak for a long time, he hadn't seen Jung Song make an appearance, and Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be slightly curious. After he saved Jung Song in the cage battle arena of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom all those years ago, he'd asked the little gold mouse to send Jung Song back to the stalactite cave on the 7-star sword sect's Megre's Peak. So logically speaking, Jung Song ought to be here. But Duan Lingtian's spiritual force had instead noticed that Jung Song wasn't within the stalactite cave. Jung Song is busier than us, as he's in charge of searching all over the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom for the surviving inner court disciples and external affairs elders of our 7-star sword sect and gathering them together. He returned once 2 months ago, and he said that he'd already found more than 30 survivors. Qin Shang said to Duan Lingtian, but, because the 7 great sword peaks of the 7-star sword sect were likely to be assaulted by the Azure Forest Tri-sect at any moment, they were placed somewhere else and didn't return to the sect. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. So that's how it is. In the future, they don't have to go into hiding any longer, because of returned. Duan Lingtian silently thought in his heart. I'll go take a look at Dubi Peak. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian recalled his intentions from earlier. Senior brother, I'll accompany you over. When he heard Duan Lingtian wanted to head to Dubi Peak, Mo Yu hurriedly offered himself up as assistance. Okay, Duan Lingtian nodded. Before long, the group of 4 led by Duan Lingtian and coupled with Elder Peng had flashed towards Dubi Peak, and they ascended Dubi Peak after a short moment. Dubi Peak hadn't changed much when compared to before. If one really wanted to note out the differences, then it would be none other than numerous traces of dried blood all along the way. Besides containing the blood of many of our 7-star sword sect's disciples, the traces of blood on the ground also contain the blood of many Azure Forest Tri-sect disciples. Qin Shang noticed Duan Lingtian was looking at the traces of blood all along the way, and she spoke slowly. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian found out from Qin Shang that when Elder Peng returned to the 7-star sword sect that day, he'd launched a slaughter and killed all the Azure Forest Tri-sect disciples that were garrisoned in the 7-star sword sect. Elder Peng, thank you. Duan Lingtian stopped suddenly, and he raised his head to look at the rock that was flapping its wings as he bowed respectfully. Thank you for what you did for the 7-star sword sect. When she saw Duan Lingtian's actions, a wisp of surprise suffused Feng Tianwu's peerlessly beautiful face. She was extremely clear about what kind of person this big brother Duan of hers was. That day, Duan Lingtian didn't bow even when facing the supreme emperor of the Darken dynasty, and it was sufficient to show how proud and unyielding Duan Lingtian was. Yet now, when faced with the sect-guarding demon beast of a tiny imperial kingdom, big brother Duan had instead bowed and expressed his gratitude. This touched her rather deeply. Lingtian, don't forget that the 7-star sword sect isn't only your sect. Elder Peng's aged voice sounded out in Duan Lingtian's ears. No matter what, everything you've done for the 7-star sword sect is worthy of being respected by all the disciples of the 7-star sword sect. Duan Lingtian spoke with a serious expression. The gazes of Qin Shang and Mo Yu flashed when they heard Duan Lingtian, and then they bowed successively to Elder Peng. Elder Peng, thank you. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian heard Qin Shang speak about the numerous times Elder Peng went to cause trouble at the Azure Forest Tri-sect and specially targeted the weak. He sighed with emotion toward this. With Elder Peng's speed, so long as there isn't a martial artist at the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage or above in the Azure Forest Tri-sect, then practically no one was capable of chasing after Elder Peng. So in this way, the Azure Forest Tri-sect's inheritance hasn't strengthened during these past few years, and it has instead shown signs of weakening because of Elder Peng's frequent visits. Duan Lingtian asked with slight surprise. Yes. Qin Shang nodded, and then she said, sometimes, even I don't know exactly why they're 3 great sects and combined, based on their current conditions, the development of their Azure Forest Tri-sect is even slower than before they combined with each other, and it's simply as if they'd raised a rock and dropped it on their own feet. It ought to not be so simple. Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed as he spoke with a low voice. Since they chose to combine into one and were even willing to abandon the sect their ancestors left behind, there's surely something they're seeking. Perhaps, Dubi Peak is able to tell us the answer. Yes, let's go carefully inspect it. Qin Shang nodded. I and Elder Peng only roughly inspected it the last time, and we didn't notice anything being off. Perhaps if we inspect it deeply, we can notice something. Subsequently, Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 and Elder Peng started to inspect every corner of Dubi Peak. After the first round of inspection, they were without the slightest discovery. Even the plants on Dubi Peak weren't damaged by the Azure Forest Trisect, and even the 9 halls that were situated atop the spirit points stood intact. Truly strange, could it be that they stayed here for 3 months for the sake of looking at the scenery? Duan Ling Tian frowned. He was sure that the matter was absolutely not so simply. Let's carefully inspect it again. Subsequently, Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 and Elder Peng started bustling about again. This time, Duan Ling Tian was even more serious than before. Wait, as Duan Ling Tian stood at the former Mizar Hall's pavilion and was reminiscing the days of him drinking tea and chatting with the Peak Master of Mizar Peak, Zheng Fan, he finally noticed something that was off. I felt something was off when I came here the first time earlier. It felt as if something was missing. Now, I can be sure that there's something wrong with the spirit points on Dubi Peak. 721 Chapter 722, A debt of blood must be repaid with blood. There was a total of 9 great spirit points on the 7-star sword sect's main peak, Dubi Peak, whereas, a hall stood on each of the 9 great spirit points, and Mizar Hall was one of these halls. When he was at the 7-star sword sect in the past, so long as he approached these halls that stood atop the spirit points, Duan Ling Tian would be able to sense extremely dense spirit energy of the heavens and the earth, yet he didn't feel anything today. Even if he stood on Mizar Hall, Duan Ling Tian wasn't able to feel anything different from the other places on Dubi Peak. In this way, there was only one possibility: something was wrong with the spirit points. Disregarding all the other spirit points, there's surely something wrong with the spirit point beneath Mizar Hall. I'll go look at the location of the other spirit points. When he thought up to here, Duan Ling Tian moved to leave Mizar Hall. In next to no time, he'd arrived at Alcade Hall, which was Qin Zhang's former place of cultivation. When he arrived at Alcade Hall, Duan Ling Tian didn't sense dense spirit energy of the heavens and the earth. Continue. Subsequently, Duan Ling Tian headed over to Fekta Hall, Merrick Hall, Dubi Hall, and the other halls that included the places of cultivation that belonged to the former Elder Ming and Elder Zan. In the end, he obtained an answer. The 9 great spirit points on Dubi Peak were completely crippled. 4 months ago, all the experts of the Azure Forest Trisect swarmed out to this Dubi Peak for an entire 3 months. During this 3 months of time, it was sufficient for them to use special methods to extract the spirit energy of heaven and earth that circulates within the spirit points and cripple the spirit points. Duan Ling Tian's expression was slightly unsightly. Through the memories of the rebirth martial emperor, Duan Ling Tian had a certain level of understanding towards spirit points. A spirit point was a comparatively common place of cultivation on Cloud Continent that was superb, and so long as one stayed atop of a spirit point and cultivated, one's cultivation would advance at a tremendous pace. Moreover, spirit points were closely related to origin stone veins. Without exception, all origin stone veins were actually a tiny spirit vein. Because the spirit vein ceaselessly absorbed and gathered the spirit energy of the heavens and the earth, after accumulation for a long period of time, the spirit energy would turn to liquid and solidify, and this was how origin stones were formed. Of course, not all spirit points had the chance to transform into an origin stone vein, and it was only those spirit veins that weren't noticed by others or weren't used by others that had the chance to transform into origin stone veins. Not to mention anything else, and just speaking about the 9 great spirit veins of the 7-star sword sect. If these 9 great spirit veins had always been left unused, and no one sees the spirit energy of heaven and earth that was accumulated within it, then it would surely form into 9 origin energy veins after a few hundreds, or even over 1,000 years later. But once someone cultivated atop a spirit point and absorbed and practically seized away the dense spirit energy within the spirit point to cultivate, then it would limitlessly slow down the speed the spirit points transformed into an origin energy vein. Actually, many people knew of this principle. But if one was asked to leave a spirit point unused and think for the sake of their descendants from another few hundreds or even over 1,000 years later and help the spirit point transform into an origin stone veins, it was impossible. After all, no one could be sure that after a few hundred or 1,000 years later, the benefits of the spirit point they left unused wouldn't be reaped by another. No one was willing to take the risk, so no one was willing to leave a spirit point unused. Not to mention the spirit points in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom are scarce, even the spirit points in the Darkstone Empire are far from being sufficient for all the martial artists of the Darkstone Empire. The Darken Dynasty's imperial family was capable of possessing an origin stone vein because the imperial family had been passed down for a few thousand years. Moreover, it possessed many spirit points. This was the reason that it was capable of leaving behind an origin stone vein for its descendants. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The hearts of men were full of greed, and no one was willing to easily let go of a benefit they could reap in the present. Unlike the Darken Dynasty, there are numerous origin stone veins in the foreign lands, and the reason it was like this was precisely because there are spirit points all over the foreign lands. The stronger a power was, the longer it had been passed down for, and because it didn't have any lack for spirit points, the ancestors of those sects would leave behind many origin stone veins for their descendants. Because of their long history, the spirit energy within some of these origin stone veins had accumulated to the extreme, so many mid-grade origin stone and even high-grade origin stones appeared within them. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's thoughts were gradually restrained back to the matter at hand. Logically speaking, it's impossible for the spirit energy accumulated within a spirit point to be completely absorbed by another. Even if 1,000 people cultivate on the same spirit point, it would at most slow down the speed they absorb the spirit energy of the heavens and the earth, yet it would be impossible for it to affect the spirit point itself. Because once the spirit energy within a spirit point is absorbed to a certain extent, the spirit point will weaken its connection with the outside world on its own and recuperate. This was something Duan Lingtian found out from the memories of the rebirth martial emperor. If one wanted to completely extract the spirit energy within a spirit point and cripple the spirit point, then one can destroy it from the outside. Exactly what have the members of the Azure Forest Trisect done? Duan Lingtian's expression became even more dark. After a short moment, Duan Lingtian, who'd caught his breath, gathered up with Feng Tianwu, Qin Shang, Mo Yu, and Elder Peng before he revealed what he'd noticed. No wonder I kept having the feeling that something was missing, so that's what it was. Those members of the Azure Forest Trisect are truly ruthless. They've actually destroyed the roots of our 7-star sword sect. Qin Shang spoke with rage. The 9 great spirit points of the 7-star sword sect could be said to be the roots that the 7-star sword sect stood on. It was even to the extent that the reason so many experts were born from the 7-star sword sect in the past, and the 7-star sword sect was publicly acknowledged as the #1 sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom for an extremely long period of time, was because of the contribution of the 9 great spirit points. Yet now, the spirit energy accumulated within the 9 great spirit points had been completely extracted, causing the 9 great spirit points to be completely crippled. If they were made to slowly recover, it would at least require more than 100 years for them to recover to normal. Azure Forest Trisect. Mo Yu's expression was unsightly to the extreme as well. As for Elder Peng, he was flapping his wings that were like clouds that covered the sky as he floated in midair, and his pair of sharp eyes flickered with ghastly hatred. The Azure Forest Trisect had gone too far. Peak Master Qin Shang, Elder Peng, Mo Yu, follow me to the Azure Forest Trisect. Duan Lingtian's tone had suddenly calmed down at this moment. The calmness of his tone revealed oppression. All right, we'll go to the outer area of the Azure Forest Trisect and kill a few ordinary disciples of the Azure Forest Trisect to take some interest for the debt they owe us. With Elder Peng's speed, it's impossible for the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Trisect to chase up to us. Qin Shang agreed, and she leapt up onto the spacious back of the rock at the first possible moment. I want to kill some Azure Forest Trisect disciples as well and take revenge for the other disciples of our sect that have passed away. Mo Yu followed up the rock's back as he gnashed his teeth and spoke. Kill some Azure Forest Trisect ordinary disciples? With the speed of Elder Peng, it's impossible for the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Trisect to chase after us. Duan Lingtian neither agreed nor disagreed with what Qin Shang said. Never had he thought of only killing some ordinary disciples when he headed to the Azure Forest Trisect this time, nor did he think of relying on Elder Peng's speed to escape. His target was to completely annihilate the Azure Forest Trisect. All those years ago, he was like an ant before the group of experts of the Azure Forest Trisect, and he couldn't withstand a single attack. Now, he had the confidence to annihilate the entire Azure Forest Trisect. Sect Leader, Peak Master Zheng Fan, Elder Bai, Senior Sister Zuo Qing, watch properly. Give me a few days and I'll surely completely remove the name of the Azure Forest Trisect from the entire Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Duan Lingtian looked up into the sky with a gaze that flickered with a frightful and fierce light as he silently thought about all these familiar names in his heart. At the same time, numerous familiar figures that were heroic and tragic flashed past his mind. The reason he was able to survive during the calamity the Seven-Star Sword sect faced was entirely because of these people laying down their lives. If they didn't shed their blood and lay down their lives in that battle, it would have been impossible for him to survive. A debt of blood must be repaid with blood. Bang! Under his extreme rage, Duan Lingtian's legs suddenly stomped onto the ground as he propelled himself up. Instantly, the ground was stomped apart by him, causing numerous cracks to seem to form a spider web as they ceaselessly spread towards the surroundings, and they spread for over 10 meters before slowing and stopping. Big Brother Duan, as she looked at the savage cracks on the ground, Feng Tianwu was able to sense Duan Lingtian's feelings of rage, and she didn't say anything before silently soaring into the sky and following by Duan Lingtian's side. Duan Lingtian, come up onto Elder Peng's back with your friend. Elder Peng's speed is faster than, Qin Shang spoke out to notify Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu, and she originally wanted to say that Elder Peng's speed was faster than them, but she was dumbstruck when Duan Lingtian's figure instantly vanished before her. So fast, Mo Yu couldn't help but cry out with shock. On the other hand, the sharp eyes of the rock looked at the direction Duan Lingtian left towards while revealing traces of astonishment. Hiss, Qin Shang couldn't help but gasp. Never had she imagined that Duan Lingtian's speed would be so swift, and he seemed to be even faster than Elder Peng. Could it be that he has already broken through to the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage? This thought had only just arisen within Qin Zhang's heart when it was suppressed down by her after a short while, and she felt that her thinking at this moment was too absurd. Whoosh! In next to no time, the red-clothed young woman followed Duan Lingtian and vanished before Qin Zhang's eyes, causing Qin Shang's expression to turn to shock once more. The speed of this friend of Duan Lingtian's isn't inferior to Elder Peng as well. Could it be that I've really become old, and I'm seeing things? What a swift speed! Mo Yu cried out in shock once more. Never had he imagined that the red-clothed young woman that looked to be 5 or 6 years younger than him would actually possess such a swift speed. In the blink of an eye, she'd vanished within his field of vision. Swish! The rock's fierce eyes revealed traces of disbelief at this moment, and his wings that seemed like clouds that covered the sky shook before he flew swiftly to follow up to Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu. After they passed through the vast clouds and mist and arrived even higher in the sky, an enormous sword appeared before the rock, and it caused the pupils of the rock to constrict. That's, as she looked at the enormous sword that floated in the horizon and especially when she felt the suffocating aura that was faintly emitted from it, Qin Zhang's expression went pale. Because of his cultivation being low, Mo Yu's loss of composure was even worse than Qin Shang. He was directly pressed down onto the back of the rock by the aura emitted from the enormous sword, and he was unable to catch his breath. Right when the rock's body stopped in midair, and he looked nervously at the enormous sword with Qin Shang. Elder Peng, come up. A familiar voice entered into his ears. 722 Chapter 723, arriving once again at the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge. Senior brother, Mo Yu, who laid weakly on the back of the rock with a pale expression, couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this voice. After the rock heard Duan Lingtian's voice, he continued to soar into the sky, and he quickly saw Duan Lingtian who stood on the enormous sword. Besides Feng Tianwu that he'd already become acquainted with, there was another unfamiliar middle-aged man and old man by Duan Lingtian's side. When he saw the middle-aged man and old man, the rock's sharp eyes revealed a strand of dense fear. Even though he was unable to see through the cultivations of these two people, as a demon beast, he subconsciously felt that these two people weren't simple, and they were existences that he couldn't afford to offend. Whoosh! Along with the approach of the rock, the enormous sword that lay across the sky expanded explosively once more, and it enlarged to be able to accommodate the rock that was like a small mountain to land on it. Under Duan Lingtian's gesturing, the rock carried Qin Shang and Mo Yu to descend onto the enormous sword. After he descended onto the enormous sword, Mo Yu heaved a sigh of relief and felt that the terrifying aura that pressed onto his body had vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! Whoosh! Qin Shang and Mo Yu arrived successively by Duan Lingtian's side, and they looked at Duan Lingtian with bewildered expressions. This is Uncle Feng, Tianwu's father. This is Elder Kong, a senior of Tianwu's as well. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he introduced Feng Wudao and Elder Kong to Qin Shang, Mo Yu, and Elder Peng and vice versa. Both parties nodded and smiled at each other as a form of greeting. Peak Master Qin Shang, where's the Azure Forest Trisect located? Duan Lingtian asked Qin Shang. The Azure Forest Tri-sect was combined and formed from the demonic Lotus Blade sect, the Origin Convergence sect, and the Snow Moon sect. He'd only gone to the demonic Lotus Blade sect and didn't know where the other two sects were located, nor did he know where the combined Azure Forest Tri-sect was located. The Azure Forest Tri-sect was originally located in 3 places, which were respectively the demonic Lotus Blade sect, the Origin Convergence sect, and the Snow Moon sect, but because of Elder Pung's frequent visits during these past few years, it forced everyone from the Azure Forest Tri-sect to gather at the location of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge. Qin Shang spoke slowly. The demonic Lotus Blade Gorge. Duan Lingtian nodded. He didn't know where the Snow Moon sect and Origin Convergence sect were located previously, but he clearly remembered where the demonic Lotus Blade sect was located. Uncle Feng, over there. Duan Lingtian notified Feng Wudao as he glanced at the east, and then Feng Wudao controlled the enormous sword to tear through the sky to head towards the location of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Swoosh. The enormous sword traversed the sky with a speed so swift that it caused Qin Shang and Mo Yu to be unable to help but go pale. Even the eyes of Elder Peng, who stood at the side of the enormous sword, couldn't help but be once again suffused with traces of fear that came from the bottom of his heart when his sharp eyes glanced unintentionally at Feng Wudao. Duan Lingtian, who exactly is this Uncle Feng of yours? Qin Shang took a deep breath and couldn't help but ask via voice transmission. Senior brother. Mo Yu looked at Duan Lingtian as well as he asked the question in his heart via voice transmission, and it was a similar question as Qin Shang. They're experts from the Darken Dynasty. Duan Lingtian replied one by one via voice transmission. Experts from the Darken Dynasty. The pupils of Qin Shang and Mo Yu couldn't help but constrict instantly, and they nodded at the same time. If it was like this, then everything could be explained. It was naturally impossible for an expert from the Darken Dynasty to be simple. Your cultivation has broken through to the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage. After she calmed down the shock in her heart, Qin Shang recalled the speed Duan Lingtian revealed earlier, and she couldn't refrain herself from asking. No. Duan Lingtian shook his head. No. Qin Shang was stunned, and then she frowned. But the speed you revealed earlier has obviously surpassed Elder Peng. How can you not be a martial artist at the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage? I'm indeed not one. Duan Lingtian shook his head once more, and then he spoke unhurriedly. My current cultivation isn't at the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage, but it's instead at the 9th level of the Void Initiation stage. 9th level of the Void Initiation stage? Qin Shang was completely stunned when she heard Duan Lingtian. Doesn't this mean that this little fellow's current strength has already left me far behind? Even she was only barely able to break through to the 6th level of the Void Initiation stage half a year ago. At the same time, Qin Xian recalled the accomplishments Duan Lingtian had achieved all along the way while he was in the 7-star sword sect, and when she thought about Duan Lingtian's current strength, at the same time that she was extremely shocked, she couldn't help but sigh. The little fellow whose name had once shaken the 7-star sword sect and was publicly acknowledged as the #1 genius of the 7-star sword sect since it was established had already stood at a height that was difficult for her to reach after a few years. After all, besides the Void Interpretation stage founding ancestor of the 7-star sword sect, the number of existences that had broken through to the 9th level of the Void Initiation stage in the history of the 7-star sword sect could be counted on one's fingers. I originally thought that I still had to wait another 10 years or so before you'll possess the strength to annihilate the Azure Forest Tri-sect, yet never had I imagined that after a short few years, you already possess a strength that's sufficient to take revenge for the 7-star sword sect. Qin Shang looked at Duan Lingtian with an extremely complicated gaze as she muttered. In next to no time, Mo Yu found out about Duan Lingtian's current cultivation from Duan Lingtian, and for a time, he similarly fell into endless shock like Qin Shang, and was unable to recover from it. In Mo Yu's eyes, his former master, the 7-star sword sect's leader, Linggu Jinhong, had a cultivation at the 6th level of the Void Initiation stage, and he was already an existence that caused Mo Yu to look up to. Yet now, this senior brother of his actually possessed a strength at the 9th level of the Void Initiation stage, and Duan Lingtian had even far surpassed the master he respected the most. For a time, he was both shocked and excited. The enormous sword shot through the sky with a speed so swift that it was unimaginable for ordinary people. It wasn't long before a gorge that was like a demonic lotus appeared before the eyes of Duan Lingtian and the others, and it grew closer and closer. Demonic Lotus Blade Gorge, Demonic Lotus Blade Sect, Duan Lingtian stood on the spacious and enormous sword as he looked down at the demonic lotus blade gorge beneath his feet, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He had a piece of memory in this place. All those years ago, he'd followed the 7-star sword sect's leader, Linggu Jinhong, to arrive at this place that originally belonged to the demonic lotus blade sect and participated in the martial competition between the 5 great sects of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. That time was also the first time he displayed extraordinary talent and became famous throughout the entire Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. He still remembered that the first time he saw Long Yun was at this place, whereas, it was precisely because he defeated Long Yun that he became famous. It's here. When the enormous sword arrived in the sky above the demonic lotus blade gorge, Duan Lingtian spoke out. Instantly, Feng Wudao controlled the enormous sword to stop, and at the same time, it slowly descended. When it arrived at a low spot in the sky, the jade sword instantly vanished with a command in his heart, whereas, Duan Lingtian's group stood in the air before slowly descending towards the demonic lotus blade gorge. When they approached closer and closer to the demonic lotus blade gorge, Duan Lingtian frowned. At this moment, he felt a vast and overbearing aura sweeping out from the north of the demonic lotus blade gorge, and it filled the entire demonic lotus blade gorge. What happened over there? Feng Tianwu looked at the north of the demonic lotus blade gorge with a surprised expression. At this moment, the sky was covered in a red glow, and it seemed as if it had become a crimson-red world. The vast and overbearing aura was precisely coming from there. Ling Tian, didn't you say that the strongest martial artist in the Azure Forest Tri-sect is only at the 6th level of the Void Initiation stage? Feng Wudao seemed to have noticed something, and he couldn't help but ask Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian obviously noticed something as well, and he couldn't help but shake his head when he heard Feng Wudao's question. I don't know what happened either, let's go over and take a look. Duan Lingtian, Feng Wudao, Feng Tianwu, and Elder Kong flew in the air by themselves, whereas, Qin Shang and Mo Yu stood on the rock's back and were barely capable of following the speed of Duan Lingtian and the others. Senior brother, meanwhile, Mo Yu had completely recovered from his shock. His gaze flickered as he looked at Duan Lingtian's back, and his body even started to tremble with excitement. At this moment, he felt the figure of this senior brother of his was so tall and mighty, to the point he could only look up at this senior brother of his. At the same time, he felt extremely excited. As far as he was concerned, with his senior brother's current strength, the revenge of the sect would surely be accomplished. Master, senior brother will take revenge for you, and the various peak master and elders today. If you can sense it in the netherworld, you can rest in peace. Mo Yu silently thought in his heart. After a short moment, Duan Lingtian's group arrived in the sky above the northern area of the demonic lotus blade gorge, and they stood in the air as they looked down at the scene below. All the disciples of the Azure Forest Tri-sect are gathered here. Qin Shang couldn't refrain from speaking with surprise when she looked down at the dense crowd below her. At this moment, a group of middle-aged men and old men stood in the sky and floated at a low altitude in the air, and they surrounded an enormous rock that was like a small mountain. The rock was completely crimson red, and besides emitting a scorching aura, it also emitted a vast and overbearing aura that struck fear in one's heart. Lu Yuan, Shui Rui, and the former demonic Lotus Blade sect's leader. Duan Lingtian looked at the group of middle-aged men and old men that stood in the air while surrounding the crimson red rock, and his eyes flickered with cold lights. All those other people as well, all of them were present when they annihilated my 7-star sword sect, all of them are culprits. Unknowingly, Duan Lingtian's eyes were tainted with a wisp of crimson red, his face was enveloped in a layer of killing intent, and the origin energy on his body had unconsciously started to leap about, whereas, the rage of Qin Shang, Elder Peng, and Mo Yu weren't any less than Duan Lingtian at this moment. Even though he was enraged, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force still descended to sweep through the group of higher-ups of the Azure Forest Tri-sect, and he quickly detected their cultivations. HMPH. The strongest is only at the 6th level of the Void Initiation stage, a group of useless fellows. A few years have passed yet they actually haven't improved in the slightest. Unknowingly, a wisp of disdain appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. The strongest amongst them was only at the 6th level of the Void Initiation stage. Merely he alone was sufficient to completely slaughter all the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Tri-sect. 723 Chapter 724, Origin Drawing Pearl. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force encountered the crimson red rock that the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Tri-sect had surrounded, and there was actually a formidable force stretching out from it. Moreover, this force was ceaselessly increasing in strength. At this moment, the entire attention of the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Tri-sect was on the Crimson Rock, otherwise they'd probably have noticed Yuan Lingtian's group that stood in the nearby sky. Long Wei. Lu Yuan, the sect leader of the former Origin Convergence sect, looked towards the former sect leader of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Could it be that the spirit energy of heaven and earth we've poured into it isn't sufficient? Long Wei frowned and looked at the nearby middle-aged scholar. Logically speaking, it ought to be sufficient. Shui Rui, pour a bit more in to try. The middle-aged scholar was precisely the sect leader of the former Snow Moon sect, Shui Rui. Shui Rui nodded, and with a raise of his hand, a pearl that flickered with a dense milky white sheen appeared in his hand. Along with his origin energy being poured into it, spirit energy of the heaven and earth that was almost liquid gushed out from the pearl and ceaselessly fused into the crimson red rock. Whereas, the crimson red rock seemed to be a greedy kid that welcomed everything, and it swallowed all the spirit energy that came its way. This is the final origin drawing pearl. If the spirit energy of heaven and earth within it is still insufficient, then I can only extract the spirit energy accumulated in the spirit points of our old sects. Shui Rui frowned when he saw the spirit energy within the origin drawing pearl about to be completely consumed. Long Wei, didn't you say before that the origin energy accumulated in the spirit points of the Mountain Split sect would be sufficient? Now, not only have we utilized the spirit energy within the spirit points of the 7-star sword sect, it even seems to be insufficient. Lu Yuan's expression sank slightly. Could it be that you intend to extract the spirit energy accumulated within the spirit points of my Origin Convergence sect and Shui Rui's Snow Moon sect? Let me be frank, even if we have to extract spirit energy from our spirit points, we have to first extract the spirit energy in the spirit points of your demonic Lotus Blade sect. Lu Yuan, what are you talking about? Your Origin Convergence sect, Shui Rui's Snow Moon sect, our demonic Lotus Blade sect. Don't forget that we've long since combined into a single sect. Or perhaps you intend to withdraw from the Azure Forest Tri-sect. If it's really like this, then I and Shui Rui will absolutely not stop you. Long Wei mocked. Long Wei. Lu Yuan's expression darkened as he spoke in a low voice. What do you mean by this? Want to burn the bridge after crossing it? Don't forget that if you didn't have the assistance of my Origin Convergence sect all those years ago, would your demonic Lotus Blade sect and Shui Rui's Snow Moon sect be capable of annihilating the 7-star sword sect? I naturally have not forgotten the assistance of the Origin Convergence sect. Long Wei said indifferently, but the words you spoke earlier was spoken while considering yourself to be the sect leader of the Origin Convergence sect. Don't forget that you're currently a sect leader of our Azure Forest Tri-sect. So long as we're able to successfully open up this Firebreath Rock, our Azure Forest Tri-sect will soar into the sky, and it'll even surpass the Imperial family of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Even if we enter the Darkstone Empire or the Darken Dynasty, there will be a place for our Azure Forest Tri-sect. Remember, look far into the future. You want to do great things with your petty character. Long Wei wasn't the slightest bit courteous with his words. Lu Yuan took a deep breath and didn't flare up in the end, and he mocked. I only hope that it's really successful. No matter what, all of you are on the same boat. This won't do, it still needs some more. The origin drawing pearl in Shui Rui's hand had already transformed into a crystalline and translucent crystal pearl at this moment, and the dense spirit energy accumulated within it was completely gone. Whoosh! At the same time, the aura emitted from the crimson red rock became even more vaster and tremendous, and it brought about an enormous pressure towards many Azure Forest Tri-sect disciples. Some Azure Forest Tri-sect disciples with low cultivations went pale as they hurriedly withdrew to the borders of the gorge and didn't dare approach any closer. Lu Yuan, Long Wei, and Shui Rui's discussion resounded out within the silent gorge, and it completely entered the ears of Duan Lingtian's group that stood high up in the sky. Their 3 great sects combined into one and annihilated the Mountain Split sect before annihilating our 7-star sword sect as well. All of this was for the sake of the spirit energy of heaven and earth accumulated within the spirit points of our sects. Qin Zhang's expression was unsightly to the extreme. Now she finally found out the reason the 3 great sects had combined all those years ago. It was for the sake of extracting the spirit energy of heaven and earth within the spirit points of the 7-star sword sect and Mountain Split sect and pouring it into the crimson red rock via the origin drawing pearls. The crimson red rock seemed to be some sort of firebreath rock. Origin drawing pearl. Duan Lingtian's face sank. I finally understand why the spirit energy within the 9 great spirit points of the 7-star sword sect would be completely gone. This origin drawing pearl is indeed capable of extracting the spirit energy accumulated within the spirit points. Origin drawing pearls were an extremely special type of treasures, and they were capable of extracting the spirit energy contained within origin stones and spirit points, but the spirit energy extracted couldn't be directly utilized to cultivate, otherwise, one's body would explode from the violent energy. After all, the spirit energy accumulated within the origin drawing pearl was spirit energy that had turned into liquid. So long as origin energy fused into it, the liquid spirit energy within would directly gush out, and the meridians within the bodies of martial artists below the martial monarch stage were utterly incapable of enduring such a force. Even a martial monarch stage expert wouldn't dare rashly take the risk and utilize liquid spirit energy to cultivate. The Mountain Split sect and the Seven-Star Sword sect were only sacrifices for the sake of opening that fire breath rock. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian clenched his fists tightly as the cold lights within his eyes grew colder to the point of seeming to be waiting for a chance to swallow his enemies up. I truly never imagined that there's actually a fire breath rock of legend in this tiny imperial kingdom. Feng Wudao stared fixedly at the crimson red rock in the gorge, and his eyes lit up. Father, what's a fire breath rock? Feng Tianwu asked curiously. You'll know soon enough. If I'm not wrong, this fire breath rock only requires a little more liquid spirit energy to be poured into it before it'll open up. Feng Wudao kept Feng Tianwu guessing, and it caused her to be both angry and irritated. Ling Tian, what do you intend to do? Do you want to go down and meet your acquaintances now, or do you want to wait a while more? Feng Wudao asked Duan Ling Tian. Let's wait a while more. I've already waited a few years, so there's no rush. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile as cold lights flickered within his eyes, and it seemed as if he was waiting for something. Alright, it's more interesting like this. Feng Wudao's calm face revealed a rare smile. Besides Elder Kong, Feng Tianwu, Qin Shang, and Mo Yu had perplexed expressions, as Duan Lingtian and Feng Wudao were keeping them guessing. As for Elder Peng, he seemed to have not heard the conversation between Duan Lingtian and Feng Wudao at all. His sharp eyes were staring fixedly at the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Tri-sect. So long as Duan Lingtian gave the order, he wouldn't hesitate in the slightest to pounce down and launch a bloody slaughter. At the same time, the numerous Azure Forest Tri-sect disciples in the demonic Lotusblade Gorge had remained silent since the beginning. At this moment, they were staring at the three sect leaders and all the elders in the sky with burning gazes. Of course, even more of them were staring at the crimson red rock. Long Wei, you ought to extract the spirit energy within the spirit points of the demonic Lotusblade sect now, right? Lu Yuan looked at Long Wei and said indifferently, the demonic Lotusblade Gorge is one of our Azure Forest Tri-sect's bases, and it's close at hand, you. HMPH. Take it. Lu Yuan hadn't finished speaking when he was interrupted by Long Wei, and with a raise of his hand, a pearl that flickered with white lights appeared in Long Wei's palm before shooting towards Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan raised his hand to receive it, and his pupils constricted as he gazed at the pearl in his hand. Origin drawing pearl. Moreover, it's filled with liquid spirit energy. Long Wei, where did you get this? Hasn't the spirit energy extracted from the spirit points of the Mountain Split sect and Seven-Star Sword sect already been used? You can be at ease, it wasn't extracted from your Origin Convergence sect spirit point, the spirit energy within is from the demonic Lotusblade Gorge. Long Wei mocked. Lu Yuan's face froze, and he felt slightly embarrassed. Earlier, he was still displaying his displeasure towards Long Wei, and he said that if the liquid spirit energy was insufficient, then Long Wei should extract the spirit energy accumulated within the spirit points of the demonic Lotusblade sect. Unexpectedly, Long Wei had extracted the spirit energy within the spirit points of the demonic Lotusblade sect long ago, and he seemed resolute to pay any price for the sake of his objective. Lu Yuan, quickly, I feel that when the spirit energy within this origin drawing pearl fuses into the fire breath rock, then it ought to be enough. Shui Rui urged Lu Yuan. If it isn't enough, then we'll extract the spirit energy within the spirit points of the Origin Convergence sect. Long Wei, I wasn't convinced of your ability in the past, but I admired your resolution today. Lu Yuan looked at Long Wei and spoke sincerely. Enough. If the origin drawing pearl in your hand isn't enough, I still have 2 more. The demonic Lotusblade Gorge has a total of 7 spirit points, and I've extracted the spirit energy from 3. I originally thought that it was better to be prepared, yet I never imagined that it would really be of use. Long Wei spoke indifferently. 3. Lu Yuan and Shui Rui glanced at each other as their pupils constricted. Never had they imagined that Long Wei would be so resolute. This was the demonic Lotusblade Gorge, the base of the demonic Lotusblade sect that he used to be the leader of. It possessed a total of 7 spirit points, yet he'd actually extracted the spirit energy from 3 of them. For a time, they could feel Long Wei's resolution. I'm inferior to him. Lu Yuan and Shui Rui sent a voice transmission to each other, yet they spoke the same thing, and it caused them to be unable to help but be stunned. After a short moment, they glanced and smiled at each other once they recovered from their shock. Lu Yuan didn't dally any longer and poured his origin energy into the origin drawing pearl in his hand. Instantly, dense liquid spirit energy gushed out to once again fuse into the crimson red rock, whereas, the crimson red rock continued to greedily swallow the liquid spirit energy, and the crimson red sheen on its surface grew darker and darker. When the half of the liquid spirit energy in the origin drawing pearls was swallowed, the enormous crimson red rock had finally stopped swallowing, yet it suddenly expanded to the point it seemed it was soon to explode, causing it to seem extremely peculiar. Bang! Suddenly, a clear sound resounded out, and a crack had appeared out of thin air on the surface of the crimson red rock. 724 Chapter 725, A 1,000-Year-Old Freak. Bang, 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 bang. After the first crack appeared, the clear sounds continued to sound out. Over 10 cracks appeared on the surface of the crimson red rock, and their densely interwoven surface seemed to form a spider web. It worked. When they saw this scene, the gazes of all the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Trisect lit up, and some of them even couldn't help but breathe more rapidly. Amongst them included the formed demonic Lotus Blade sect's leader, Long Wei. Long Wei's body lightly trembled as he gazed at the crimson red rock that was covered in cracks, and because of his excitement, his firm face was suffused with a bloody flush. The gorge was deathly silent. Everyone had held their breaths as they stared fixedly at the crimson red rock that vibrated intensely, and the cracks that were like a spiderweb on the surface of the rock had spread all over it in the blink of an eye. At the same time, a vast and overbearing aura swept out from the rock, and it rose ceaselessly in strength, giving rise to waves of terrifying airwaves that transformed into piercingly cold gales that blew towards the surroundings. Some Azure Forest Trisect disciples with low cultivations were directly blown onto the ground. Even though the others weren't blown onto the ground, yet these waves of terrifying gales that assaulted their faces caused them to be unable to refrain from instinctively closing their eyes. Even the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Trisect had moved back slightly. Bang! Finally, an enormous sound that was like a thunderclap resounded out abruptly, and the crimson red rock that was covered with cracks had exploded open. All the crimson red rocks that exploded out were enveloped by crimson red flames before completely transforming into powder. Along with the gradual disappearance of the gale that assaulted their faces, most of the people present couldn't help but open their eyes, and at the first possible moment, they looked towards the place where the crimson red rock had exploded open. In next to no time, a figure that was sitting cross-legged appeared before their eyes. This was a black-clothed middle-aged man with disheveled hair. His eyes were closed as he sat cross-legged at a low altitude in the air, and his body revolved ceaselessly. A crimson red flame that shot into the sky enveloped his body, and it emitted strands of vast and overbearing aura that caused one to feel oppressed. Suddenly, the black-clothed middle-aged man opened his eyes, and his eyes contained strands of scorching flames that leapt about within, causing others to not dare lightly look him in the eyes. The scorching flames in the black-clothed middle-aged man's eyes gradually dispersed, and replacing it was a perplexed expression. He looked into his surroundings as he frowned and muttered, "What place is this? Ancestor." Long Wei was the first to react. His figure flashed out to arrive right before the black-clothed middle-aged man in a short moment, and he knelt of the floor with a thump, before speaking with a humble and trembling tone. "Ancestor." After Long Wei, the group of higher-ups that belonged to the demonic Lotus Blade sect followed to kneel down. All of their bodies trembled, and their faces flushed red as they were extremely excited. "Ancestor. Ancestor." At the same time, Lu Yuan, Shui Rui, and the other higher-ups of the Azure Forest Trisect descended from the sky and knelt on the ground as they respectfully greeted the black-clothed middle-aged man that sat cross-legged there. When they saw all 3 sect leaders and all the elders had knelt down, the remaining disciples of the Azure Forest Trisect didn't dare dally and knelt down, and the faces of most of them were filled with excitement. Even though they were mentally prepared since long ago, but when they really saw a living person appear from within the crimson red rock, they still couldn't help but feel shocked. "Ancestor. Ancestor." For a time, the entire gorge was filled with sonorous sounds of respectful address. The crowd of Azure Forest Trisect disciples that surrounded the gorge bowed, and the dense mass of them made an extremely magnificent scene. "All of you are disciples of my demonic Lotus Blade sect. The black-clothed middle-aged man was silent for a moment when facing the scene before him, and then he looked at Long Wei, who was the first to kneel before him, and asked indifferently. At the same time, the billowing flames on the black-clothed middle-aged man's body gradually restrained themselves before finally condensing into a lotus seat that appeared beneath him. Whoosh! The black-clothed middle-aged man slowly descended onto the lotus seat, and he seemed like a supreme emperor that had ascended his throne. The demonic Lotus Blade sect's 52nd sect leader, Long Wei, congratulates ancestor on awakening from your slumber. Long Wei knelt on the ground as he spoke respectfully. 52nd, the black-clothed middle-aged man's eyes flickered with flowing lights when he heard Long Wei, and then he asked after a short while. How long has it been since I established the demonic Lotus Blade sect all those years ago? Over 1,300 years. Long Wei replied respectfully. Established the demonic Lotus Blade sect? Even though Lu Yuan, Shui Rui, the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Tri-sect, and all the disciples had heard Long Wei mention it before, but when they saw it with their own eyes and heard it themselves at this moment, they couldn't help but be shocked. He's the demonic Lotus Blade sect's founding ancestor. Lu Yuan's pupils constricted as his heartbeat quickened. I never imagined that the legends were true. The fire breath rock is really capable of allowing one to slumber for 1,000 years and remain without perishing. Shui Rui gasped. The black-clothed middle-aged man was precisely the founding ancestor of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. In the past, there'd always been a legend in the demonic Lotus Blade sect. This legend was precisely related to the fire breath rock in the forbidden area of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Supposedly, the fire breath rock in the forbidden area of the demonic Lotus Blade sect had already existed since the establishment of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. It was even to the extent that the legend said the founding ancestor had no choice but to rely on the fire breath rock to slumber and recuperate when he suffered a heavy injury, and in the end, he'd practically fused into one with the fire breath rock. In the legends, the fire breath rock was capable of allowing one to slumber for 1,000 years without perishing, whereas, if one wanted to allow the person slumbering within the fire breath rock to leave it, one must gather a huge amount of liquid spirit energy and pour it into the fire breath rock to force it to split open by itself. If one were to forcefully split it open, then even if the fire breath rock was shattered, the person that was slumbering within would be blasted into pieces and die as well. If one wanted to gather liquid spirit energy, one's first required to be in possession of origin drawing pearls, as only origin drawing pearls were capable of storing liquid spirit energy. During these past 1,000 years, the demonic Lotus Blade sect had always been working hard to search for origin drawing pearls just for the sake of awakening the founding ancestor that was slumbering within the fire breath rock. Because of the uniqueness of the fire breath rock, the person that slumbered within the fire breath rock was completely separated from the outside world, and the person wouldn't decay along with the passage of time. Even though the cultivation environment within the fire breath rock was extremely bad, and the person within could only passively cultivate, but after being within it for so many years, the cultivation of the person that slumbered within would surely receive an extremely great increase. So all the successive sect leaders of the demonic Lotus Blade sect had wanted to awaken the founding ancestor from many years ago. They knew that so long as the founding ancestor awoke, he would surely lead the demonic Lotus Blade sect to a new stage. Needless to say, Long Yun was lucky and chanced upon 18 origin drawing pearls, and it was equivalent to obtaining the keys to opening the fire breath rock. Yet he possessed the origin drawing pearls, but lacked the liquid spirit energy. Because of this, the subsequent events had occurred. Due to being unsure if the spirit energy accumulated within the 7 spirit points of the demonic Lotus Blade sect would be enough, Long Wei had looked for Lu Yuan and Shui Rui to combine their sects and plan this matter. In next to no time, they'd aimed their sights at the Mountain Split sect and 7-Star Sword sect, whereas, the reason Long Wei had chosen Lu Yuan and Shui Rui was because the sect leaders of the 7-Star Sword sect and Mountain Split sect were more impervious to reason and conservative. Along with the combining of the 3 great sects, they attacked mightily to first annihilate the Mountain Split sect, and then the 7-Star Sword sect. Because of this, they obtained the 7 spirit points of the Mountain Split sect and the 9 spirit points of the 7-Star Sword sect. Now, after they poured the liquid spirit energy accumulated within the 16 spirit points of the 7-Star Sword sect and Mountain Split sect into the fire breath rock, coupled with almost 2 spirit points worth of liquid spirit energy from the demonic Lotus Blade sect, they'd finally successfully opened the fire breath rock. When he saw the fire breath rock explode and a black-clothed middle-aged man appear from within it, Long Wei knew that everything he'd done for these past few years wasn't done in vain. I truly never imagined that it has actually been so long since I entered into the slumber in the Firebreath Rock that day, but you've done extremely well to actually open the Firebreath Rock and awaken me. After he found out of the course of events from Long Wei, the black-clothed middle-aged man nodded with satisfaction. Ancestor, this was my duty. Long Wei lay prone on the ground with a trembling body, and he was still unable to restrain the excitement in his heart. From today onwards, the Azure Forest Trisect doesn't exist. In next to no time, the black-clothed middle-aged man's eyes were like a bolt of lightning as he stared at Lu Yuan and Shui Rui before speaking slowly. The demonic Lotus Blade sect was established by me, and I won't allow it to vanish in the annals of history. Do the both of you have any objections? No, no. The instant the middle-aged man's fierce gaze swept over, Lu Yuan and Shui Rui were suppressed to the point they were incapable of catching their breaths, and they hurriedly shook their heads when they heard the black-clothed middle-aged man. What a joke! How would they dare have any objections at a time like this? Very good. The black-clothed middle-aged man nodded, and then he continued. Now, I'll give both of you two paths. One of them is to become vice leaders of my demonic Lotus Blade sect and serve under Long Wei, and you'll cut all ties with the Origin Convergence sect and Snow Moon sect for eternity. The second is to bring your people along and FK off back to your Origin Convergence sect and Snow Moon sects. I'm willing to become a vice leader of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. When faced with the two choices given by the black-clothed middle-aged man, Lu Yuan and Shui Rui didn't hesitate in the slightest and spoke out hurriedly. Even though they would be lower in position than Long Wei because of this, they didn't mind. Because the current demonic Lotus Blade sect was already not the former demonic Lotus Blade sect. With the strength of the founding ancestors of the demonic Lotus Blade sect that stood before them, it was sufficient to lead the demonic Lotus Blade sect to have a place in the Darkstone Empire and even the Darkened Dynasty. At that time, even if they were only vice leaders, it would be far greater than a sect leader of a sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Very good. The black-clothed middle-aged man nodded with satisfaction, and then he raised his voice. All of you remember, from today onwards, the sect leader of the demonic Lotus Blade sect is still Long Wei. I, Jia Hong, will obey the supreme elder of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. As soon as the black-clothed middle-aged man finished speaking. Supreme Elder, with Long Wei, the new sect leader of the demonic Lotus Blade sect in the lead, everyone in the demonic Lotus Blade sect bowed as they cried out respectfully. 725 Chapter 726, Good for Nothing Trash. Good, ha 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 ha, Jia Hong laughed happily as he looked at the generations of disciples before him. 1,000 years had passed, and he'd finally awoken from within the Firebreath Rock. Ancestor, I wonder what your current cultivation is. After a short moment, Long Wei looked at Jia Hong and asked with slight anticipation. With my current cultivation, it's sufficient to lead the demonic Lotus Blade sect to possess a place of its own in the Darkened Dynasty. Jia Hong's eyes flashed as he spoke slowly. The Darkened Dynasty. Long Wei's face was once again suffused with a flush of excitement when he heard Jia Hong, whereas, Lu Yuan, Shui Rui, the other higher-ups of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, and the crowd of disciples in the surroundings were exceedingly excited as well. From the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom directly to the Darkened Dynasty, and it directly crossed over the Darkstone Empire. The demonic Lotus Blade sect could be said to be soaring into the sky with a single leap. Of course, they knew clearly in their hearts that the reason the future of the demonic Lotus Blade sect was bright was because of the founding ancestor of the demonic Lotus Blade sect before them. When one man becomes powerful, those around him rise up alongside him. It was nothing more than that. Are those people above members of our demonic Lotus Blade sect as well? Suddenly, Jia Hong frowned and slightly raised his head to look up high into the sky. He'd noticed there was a group of people in the sky since the moment he'd emerged from the Firebreath Rock, but he didn't know the origins of these people at that time, so he paid no attention. After that, everyone in the demonic Lotus Blade sect from the sect leader Long Wei had bowed and addressed him respectfully, yet that group of people remained indifferent, and it caused him to realize that the group of people ought to not be members of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Along with Jia Hong speaking out, the group of demonic Lotus Blade sect higher-ups and disciples including Long Wei, Shui Rui, and Lu Yuan raised their heads to look up. With a single glance, they noticed the group of people that stood in the air. If it wasn't for Jia Hong calling attention to the group of people, they wouldn't have noticed the group. We've been noticed. Mo Yu frowned high above in the sky as he glanced at Jia Hong with slight fear, and then he looked at Duan Lingtian and couldn't help but asked. Senior brother, is this Jia Hong really the founding ancestor of the demonic Lotus Blade sect? Obviously, Mo Yu had heard what the demonic Lotus Blade sect's leader Long Wei had said to Jia Hong earlier, and he knew the sequence of events from the three great sects combining to the annihilation of the Mountain Split sect and Seven-Star Sword sect. This caused him to be both infuriated and anxious. If he possessed the sufficient strength, he would have made a move long ago to wipe out the people below. Yes, Duan Lingtian nodded. The fire breath rock has always been a miraculous thing. A person that slumbers within it is indeed capable of experiencing 1,000 years without perishing, so, Jia Hong is most probably the founding ancestor of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Gulp. When he heard Duan Lingtian's confirmation, Mo Yu difficultly gulped a mouthful of saliva. Then his cultivation. It's all of you. Mo Yu hadn't finished speaking when he was already interrupted by another. Swoosh, 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 comma. The higher-ups of the demonic Lotus Blade sect led by the sect leader Long Wei soared into the sky and arrived at the altitude Duan Lingtian and the others were at in the blink of an eye, before surrounding Duan Lingtian's group within. Many demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples of the void-prying stage had soared into the sky successively and surrounded Duan Lingtian's group as well. Qin Shang, and the detestable rock. Long Wei's gaze descended onto Qin Shang and the rock at the first possible moment, and a ferocious light flickered within his eyes. Since all of you have come today, then don't dream of leaving. Duan Lingtian, I didn't expect that even you've come. We let you escape 5 years ago, but don't dream of escaping today. Lu Yuan looked at Duan Lingtian with a frenzied smile on his face, and it seemed as if Duan Lingtian was a piece of meat on the chopping block. Even if the rock wasn't present today, all of you wouldn't be capable of fleeing. Shui Rui's face was covered with confidence, and it was confidence towards their demonic Lotus Blade sect's ancestor. Escape. Duan Lingtian started laughing as he glanced indifferently at Lu Yuan, and then he glanced at Long Wei, Shui Rui, and all the figures he knew in the surroundings. All these people had participated in the annihilation of the Seven-Star Sword sect. All of you really think highly of yourselves. I need to escape from good-for-nothing trash like all of you. As he finished laughing, the brilliant and bright smile on Duan Lingtian's face turned into a cold smile, and he brazenly ridiculed all the higher-ups of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. You dare be disrespectful to the 3 sect leaders and all the elders. I'll kill you. Right when the expression of Long Wei and the others sank, a demonic Lotus Blade sect elder flashed out to suddenly pounce towards Duan Lingtian, and a spirit saber appeared out of thin air in his hand before a saber light bloomed into existence. Whoosh! When this demonic Lotus Blade sect elder attacked, an ancient horned dragon silhouette appeared above him before another few thousand ancient mammoth silhouette appeared. 7th level of the Void Initiation stage. Half-step advanced saber force. Besides that, it was a low-grade spirit weapon that was like trash in the eyes of Duan Lingtian. The demonic Lotus Blade sect arrived before Duan Lingtian in the blink of an eye before the sword light in his hand whistled out to envelope Duan Lingtian, and he wanted to kill Duan Lingtian with a single strike. In the eyes of all the demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples, the speed of this elder could be considered to be extremely swift, yet it was pitiably slow in Duan Lingtian's eyes. Trash. When the demonic Lotus Blade sect elder was extremely close, Duan Lingtian spoke a single word indifferently before suddenly raising his hand. He didn't even utilize a spirit weapon or concept as his palm formed into a blade and slashed out, and his origin energy skyrocketed on his palm as it moved to intercept the spirit saber in the demonic Lotus Blade sect elder's hand. Bang! Duan Lingtian's palm that was formed into a blade easily blasted away the spirit saber in the hands of the demonic Lotus Blade sect elder, and then it didn't slow down in the slightest as it directly struck towards the elder's head and shattered it. In the next moment, Duan Lingtian retracted his hand, and the phenomenon of heaven and earth was unable to condense into form in the sky above him since the beginning. Whoosh! A gust of cold wind blew by, and it caused the group of demonic Lotus Blade sect members to feel their hearts go cold. The skull of the demonic Lotus Blade sect elder that attacked Duan Lingtian had shattered open, causing fresh blood to spray all over and plunge to the ground. Bang! His corpse emitted a loud bang as it descended onto the ground. Silence. The entire clamorous gorge instantly became deathly silent. After a short moment, the group of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples in the gorge recovered from their shock, and their expressions went grim. Who dares come to our demonic Lotus Blade sect to kill our members? He even killed an elder of our demonic Lotus Blade sect. No matter who it is, he's dead for sure. Exactly. Not to mention our demonic Lotus Blade sect's ancestor has already appeared. Even during normal times, no one dares to be so presumptuous in our demonic Lotus Blade sect. That rock seems to be the Seven-Star Sword sect's guarding demon beast. Many of our peers have died at its hands in the past. He won't be able to flee today. Perhaps the sect leader's speed is inferior to it, but if the ancestor wanted to kill it, it would be as simple as cutting a blade of grass. Of course, the Supreme Elder is an existence that's capable of leading us to obtain a place of our own in the Darken Dynasty. The Supreme Elder is at least an expert at the Void interpretation stage. Moreover, it's likely that the Supreme Elder isn't an ordinary first-level Void interpretation stage expert. The Void interpretation stage, according to my knowledge, even if it's the Darkstone Empire, only the Imperial family possesses a Void interpretation stage expert, and he's the #1 expert of the Darkstone Empire. Perhaps our ancestor is even stronger than the #1 expert of the Darkstone Empire. The crowd of demonic Lotusblade sect disciples discussed animatedly. As they spoke, their confidence grew greatly, and they were filled with confidence towards their demonic Lotusblade sect's Supreme Elder. At this moment, high above in the sky, all the demonic Lotusblade sect members that had surrounded Duan Lingtian's group had successively recovered from their shock. Duan Lingtian's natural talent is really monstrous. 5 years ago, when the Seven-Star Sword sect was annihilated, he was only a nascent soul stage martial artist. 5 years later, he's actually capable of killing a 7th-level void-prying stage elder of our demonic Lotusblade sect. Fortunately, he has come now. Otherwise, if another 10 or 20 years passes, then our demonic Lotusblade sect might not be capable of enduring the flames of his rage. I don't think so. So long as our demonic Lotusblade sect's Supreme Elder is present, even if we give Duan Lingtian another 20 years, he might not be capable of doing anything to our demonic Lotusblade sect. Then how about another 30, 40, or 50 years? After all, he's too young when compared to the Supreme Elder. You're right, but, since he has come today, he's dead for sure. The crowd of void-prying stage demonic Lotusblade sect disciples that surrounded Duan Lingtian's group couldn't refrain from whispering in discussion. The gazes they shot at Duan Lingtian seemed as if they were looking at a dead man. Duan Lingtian. Long Wei's gaze stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. Needless to say, your current strength has really surprised me. You're worthy of being the #1 genius in the history of the Seven-Star Sword sect and the young expert that's capable of suppressing the 5 great young masters of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Sect Leader Long, you're too kind. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile. If I was you, I would continue enduring. If you waited another few tens of years, you would perhaps be capable of taking revenge for the Seven-Star Sword sect. But unfortunately, you chose to make an appearance now. Even if the rock is present today, it's impossible for all of you to escape. Slight ridicule appeared on Long Yun's face. All of you are really good at choosing the time. You didn't come earlier nor later, but just happened to choose the time that our demonic Lotusblade sect's ancestor has returned to the world. With the ancestor present, this rock of your Seven-Star Sword sect can only dream of gaining an advantage over us in terms of speed. Lu Yuan sneered. Is something wrong with your ears? Duan Lingtian had a calm expression as he asked indifferently. Duan Lingtian's words caused everyone from the demonic Lotusblade sect to be stunned. Didn't you hear me call all of you good-for-nothing trash? Could it be that all of you thought that those were words spoken out of rage? Or perhaps all of you thought I'm only calling all of you good-for-nothing trash and didn't include that 1,000-year-old freak in? Duan Lingtian ridiculed. As he looked at the expressions of the members of the demonic Lotusblade sect that became darker, he felt delighted. Duan Lingtian, do you really think that you're invincible under the heavens, just because you're capable of killing a 7th-level void-prying stage elder of our demonic Lotusblade sect? If I, Lu Yuan, want to kill you, it's even simpler than stomping an ant to death. Lu Yuan's gloomy expression tensed up as his eyes flickered with a ferocious light, and the origin energy on his body leapt up into appearance. In the next moment, he took a stride forward before pouncing towards Duan Lingtian. Lu Yuan's strength was on a completely different level than the 7th-level void-prying stage elder of the demonic Lotusblade sect from before. Practically the instant Lu Yuan strode out, he'd already arrived before Duan Lingtian. Bang! With a raise of his hand, his palm descended with earth-shattering force as it swept towards Duan Lingtian. 726 Chapter 727, Trash. Lu Yuan attacked Duan Lingtian with merely his palm, and he didn't utilize any spirit weapons. Perhaps, as far as he was concerned, Duan Lingtian wasn't worthy of his utilizing a spirit weapon. In next to no time, he realized that no matter if he utilized a spirit weapon or not, the outcome would be the same. When faced with Lu Yuan's palm that struck towards him like a bolt of lightning, and as he felt the piercingly cold winds emitted by Lu Yuan's palm that assaulted his face, Duan Lingtian didn't dodge as he raised his hand and pointed out. Tempest Point. A strand of material origin energy point force shot out from the tip of Duan Lingtian's finger, and its surroundings were coiled by a strand of azure-colored energy and a strand of violet-colored energy. They were precisely Duan Lingtian's 8th level wind concept and 3rd level lightning concept. Lu Yuan's palm that struck towards Duan Lingtian couldn't be said to be slow. Swish. But unfortunately, the speed Duan Lingtian pointed out with his finger was even swifter, and it easily penetrated Lu Yuan's palm. Then it didn't slow down in the slightest as it pierced in between Lu Yuan's brows before he has the chance to let out a shrill cry. Instantly, a savage and terrifying bloody hole appeared between Lu Yuan's brows, and it ceaselessly gushed with dazzling and resplendent blood. Lu Yuan's body trembled for no reason as his penetrated palm fell limply at his side, and he struggled to glance at Duan Lingtian with eyes that were filled with extreme terror. In the next moment, his body couldn't hold on any longer, and it plunged to the ground. Bang! Lu Yuan crashed onto the ground, and he was completely devoid of any signs of life. For a time, no matter if it was within the gorge or in the sky above the gorge, the entire world had fallen into deathly silence. Sect leader Lu Yuan has been killed. My god, exactly who is the person that has come? He seems to have only used a single attack to kill sect leader Lu Yuan. It's too far away, I'm utterly unable to see that person's face clearly. Alas, if only I possessed a cultivation at the void prying stage or above. I can only stand here and look from afar, yet be unable to see anything. It's truly depressing. The crowd of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples in the gorge went into an uproar once again, and most of them were astonished by what had happened. Lu Yuan was the vice sect leader of their demonic Lotus Blade sect and possessed a cultivation at the 6th level of the void initiation stage. But it was exactly an existence like this that was killed in a single move, whereas, the group of people led by the demonic Lotus Blade sect's leader, Lu Yuan, were completely dumbstruck. They glanced down from afar at Lu Yuan's corpse before being unable to refrain from raising their heads to look at the violet-clothed young man in the distance. For a time, only disbelief and shock remained within their gazes. Duan Lingtian killed Lu Yuan with a single move. If they didn't see the scene before with their own 2 eyes, who amongst them would believe that everything that happened earlier was real? Now, they finally understood why Duan Lingtian was so confident from the beginning until the end. It turned out that he'd already possessed a strength at the 7th level of the void initiation stage or above. Even though the phenomenon of the heaven and the earth couldn't completely condense into form in time when Duan Lingtian attacked earlier, they were practically able to be sure that Duan Lingtian was absolutely in existence at the 7th level of the void initiation stage or above. If he wasn't in existence at the 7th level of the void initiation stage or above, would he be capable of killing Lu Yuan, who was at the 6th level of the void initiation stage, with a single move? Will the next be you, or perhaps all of you? Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed past Long Wei before descending onto Shui Rui, and then it finally descended onto the guardian elders of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. All these old fellows were existences at the 6th level of the void initiation stage. When the 7-star sword sect was annihilated 5 years ago, Long Wei, Shui Rui, and all these old fellows were the culprits. It could be said that practically all the higher-ups of the 7-star sword sect had died at their hands. Of course, there was also Zhao Ming and Tang Huo. But those two were trapped within the inscription formation at the Darkstone Empire at this moment, and it was impossible for them to escape in a short period of time. Long Wei, Shui Rui, and the guardian elders of the demonic Lotus Blade sect looked at each other when they heard this, and their expressions were livid, yet none of them dared answer Duan Lingtian. What a joke! Even Lu Yuan was killed by Duan Lingtian with a single move. Even if there were people with strength stronger than Lu Yuan amongst them, it wouldn't be much stronger. They were sure that if they dared go against Duan Lingtian, it would surely result in certain death. So they didn't dare make any movements. Long Wei and the others looked at Duan Lingtian with an extremely complicated gaze. 5 years ago, when they led the Azure Forest Tri-sect to head to the 7-star sword sect and annihilate it, Duan Lingtian was only a nascent soul stage martial artist, and he was weak like an ant in their eyes. 5 years later, when they met Duan Lingtian once more and saw Duan Lingtian kill a 7th level void prying stage elder of their demonic Lotus Blade sect with a single move, they couldn't help but be surprised by this. They were surprised by Duan Lingtian's improvement in these 5 years. Subsequently, Lu Yuan had attacked Duan Lingtian, yet he was still killed by Duan Lingtian in a single move. At that moment, they had the feeling as if they were dreaming. Yet their strained nerves were telling them at all times that they weren't dreaming, and all of this was real. At this moment, the other higher-ups and the group of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples that surrounded Duan Lingtian's group couldn't help but retreat slightly, and they looked at Duan Lingtian with gazes filled with terror. Especially the ground of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples. Earlier, they were whispering in discussion and felt that so long as their ancestor was present, then it would be impossible for Duan Lingtian to do anything to the demonic Lotus Blade sect even after another 10 or 20 years. But when they witnessed Duan Lingtian's strength, they instead didn't dare think about it anymore. What a joke! If a young expert that was capable of breaking through from the nascent soul stage to the 7th level of the void initiation stage in a short 5 years of time was given another 10 or 20 years, they wouldn't be surprised even if he broke through to the void transformation stage. Qin Shang and Mo Yu stood behind Duan Lingtian, and they couldn't help but reveal a smile of happiness. At this moment, they felt proud and elated. Even the sharp eyes of the rock that circled in the air couldn't help but be suffused with a slightly gratified expression when he looked at Duan Lingtian. He suddenly felt that the group of experts of the 7-star sword sect laying down their lives to send Duan Lingtian out of the sect 5 years ago was such a wise decision. It was precisely because of this that Duan Lingtian was able to survive. 5 years. A mere 5 years of time, yet the youth from all those years ago already possessed the strength to take revenge for the 7-star sword sect, a strength that even he had to look up to. If the people in the scene who were the calmest were noted, then it would surely be Feng Wudao, Feng Tianwu, and Elder Kong, who stood at the side. They'd only followed Duan Lingtian to watch the show. Of course, they wouldn't stand idly by if Duan Lingtian encountered something he wasn't able to deal with. Duan Lingtian, even though both of us are standing on opposite sides, I have to admit that you're indeed an unparalleled genius in the martial Dao. In a mere 5 years of time, you transformed from a nascent soul stage martial artist into an expert at the 7th level of the void initiation stage or above. Your natural talent is sufficient to look down upon all the geniuses of the younger generation in the Darken Dynasty. Long Wei looked at Duan Lingtian with a serious expression. Your Azure Forest Tri-sect, oh wait, I almost forgot, all of you aren't the Azure Forest Tri-sect any longer. Your demonic Lotus Blade sect has an absolutely irreconcilable enmity with me. Don't dream that a few words of praise will make me stop. Duan Lingtian glanced coldly and indifferently at Long Wei as he spoke. Duan Lingtian, Shui Chen said with a low voice. We admit that your strength is extremely strong, and it's even stronger than all of us. If it was before, our demonic Lotus Blade sect would perhaps be annihilated at your hand. But our demonic Lotus Blade sect's ancestor has appeared today, and even if you've broken through to the 7th level of the void initiation stage, you're dead without a doubt. Perhaps to emphasize Shui Rui's words, the black-clothed middle-aged man that sat cross-legged on the lotus seat at a low altitude vanished along with his lotus seat in the blink of an eye. When he appeared once again, he'd already appeared before Long Wei, and he looked at Duan Lingtian with a calm expression. You broke through from a nascent soul stage martial artist to become a 7th level void initiation stage martial artist in 5 years. Jia Hong's words contained no lack of a questioning tone. Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Jia Hong, and he shrugged with a slight lack of interest. Old fellow, don't talk to me with such a tone, I'm not one of your demonic Lotus Blade sect's disciples. Presumptuous. Duan Lingtian, how dare you be disrespectful to the supreme elder of my demonic Lotus Blade sect? Practically the instant Duan Lingtian finished speaking, Long Wei, Shui Rui, and another few guardian elders of the demonic Lotus Blade sect went grim as they shouted out angrily. Presumptuous. Disrespectful. Duan Lingtian laughed with disdain and ridicule. I was presumptuous and disrespectful to him, so what? Could it be that all of you want to make a move against me? The expressions of Long Wei and the others were extremely unsightly when being ridiculed like this by Duan Lingtian, yet they just happened to not dare reply or make a move. If you don't dare make a move, then take care of your own mouths, trash. Duan Lingtian laughed coldly as he trampled upon the dignity of Long Wei and the others. Trash. The expressions of Long Wei, Shui Rui, and the other guardian elders of the demonic Lotus Blade sect darkened. When had they ever suffered such humiliation? However, even if they were humiliated by Duan Lingtian like this, they could only endure and not dare flare up. Duan Lingtian's strength was too strong to them, and it was far from something they could go against. Once they made a move against him, the outcome would be no different than Lu Yuan. Ha ha ha, right when Long Wei and the others wanted to ask the Jia Hong to make a move against Duan Lingtian, Jia Hong had suddenly burst out in laughter. Duan Lingtian frowned. This old fellow of the demonic Lotus Blade sect wouldn't have gone mad, right? Little fellow. Jia Hong looked at Duan Lingtian with interest as he said slowly, I heard from Long Wei earlier that you only spent 5 years of time to break through to the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage from the nascent soul stage. Needless to say, you're a man of great potential. Duan Lingtian still paid no attention when he heard Jia Hong, and his eyes that flickered with cold lights and emitted killing intent stared fixedly at Long Wei and the others. Duan Lingtian's killing intent caused the expressions of Long Wei and the others to become extremely unsightly, and all of them felt their scalps go numb. Little fellow, since the 7-star sword sect was annihilated, it can only be said that the 7-star sword sect is useless and doesn't possess the qualifications to become your sect. How about you take me as your master? Jia Hong looked at Duan Lingtian and publicly tried to poach Duan Lingtian from the 7-star sword sect. 727 Chapter 728, The Terrified Jia Hong. Duan Lingtian's expression finally sank. But Jia Hong instead seemed as if he didn't notice. So long as you take me as your master and so long as you're willing, I can even allow you to become the new sect leader of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, otherwise, you can be an enforcement elder that reigns supreme over the sect leader, and you'll only be below me. How about it? Supreme Elder, he killed Vice Sect Leader Lu earlier, he's an enemy of our demonic Lotus Blade sect. Jia Hong's words caused a guardian elder of the demonic Lotus Blade sect to become anxious, and he looked angrily at Jia Hong. But in the next moment, the countenance of this guardian elder instantly turned extremely pale as his hands grasped tightly onto his throat and fresh blood sprayed out from his throat to taint his hands red. Why? The guardian elder's gaze seemed distant, and he looked at Jia Hong with an unwilling expression at the moment before his death before losing all signs of life and plunging down to the ground. Bang! The corpse emitted an enormous bang when it hit the ground. For a time, there was a corpse laying at the exact center of the gorge. How swift! Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he revealed slight fear from his eyes. He was actually unable to see Jia Hong attack in the slightest, and he only had an extremely slight and brief sound of the wind, and at the instant when the howl of the wind vanished, the demonic Lotus Blade sect guardian elder was already killed. Is there anyone else that wants to question my words? Jia Hong's piercingly cold gaze flashed past Long Wei and the others. Instantly, Long Wei and the others went silent. Even though there were many people in the demonic Lotus Blade sect, yet not a single person dared speak at this moment. They were able to discern that the Supreme Elder had taken a fancy towards Duan Lingtian's monstrous and peerless natural talent, and he wanted to take Duan Lingtian as his disciple and inheritor of his mantle. HMPH. Duan Lingtian grunted coldly with disdain when he saw Jia Hong look over once more. Old fellow, if I want to suppress all of these people, it's extremely easy with my strength. Why would I need to borrow your might? Jia Hong didn't get angry when facing Duan Lingtian's disdain, and he nodded instead. You're right, but you've forgotten something. If you don't agree to be my disciple today, then you're dead. You won't have the chance to deal with them or even annihilate my demonic Lotus Blade sect. When he spoke up to hear, the smile on Jia Hong's face vanished, and it was covered in a layer of ice instead. I'll give you 2 choices, either kneel down and become my disciple, or die. Die. Jia Hong's voice was like a resounding thunderclap that suddenly exploded out in the sky of the gorge, and it caused all the demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples present to be unable to help but feel a chill run down their spines. They knew that the Supreme Elder was enraged. The eyes of Long Wei, Shui Rui, and the other higher-ups of the demonic Lotus Blade sect flickered with bright lights, as they hoped in their hearts that Duan Lingtian wouldn't submit. If Duan Lingtian submitted, then it would also mean that they would have this kid reigning supreme over them in the future. This was something they weren't willing to accept. Of course, if Duan Lingtian really submitted, then even if they weren't willing, they had no other choice. The true master of the demonic Lotus Blade sect now was the Supreme Elder that had just risen to power in the sect, and it wasn't them. Duan Lingtian didn't have any reaction when faced with Jia Hong's threats, yet Qinshang and Mo Yu had already gone pale. At this moment, the vast and overbearing aura that stretched out from Jia Hong's body swept over and caused them to feel extremely suffocated. Martial Ant Qinshang, senior brother really has the confidence to deal with this old freak. Mo Yu felt slightly terrified when facing Jia Hong, and he couldn't help but send a voice transmission to ask Qinshang. He ought to. Qinshang was slightly unsure. Swish. The rock circled around in the sky above Duan Lingtian, and his wings that were like clouds that covered the sky had spread out to cause surging waves of air and sharp howls of the wind. His pair of sharp eyes were staring fixedly at Jia Hong, and so long as Jia Hong dared attack Duan Lingtian, he wouldn't hesitate in the slightest to pounce down. Even though he knew that he was far from being Jia Hong's match, yet he would lay down his life to protect Duan Lingtian. He was willing to use his corpse to pave a path towards survival for Duan Lingtian. I'm truly sorry. Duan Lingtian's expression remained unchanged when facing Jia Hong's threats, and he had a carefree expression from the beginning until the end, as if everything before him was utterly unrelated to him. I don't want to choose either of the choices you gave me. Don't want to choose. Duan Lingtian's words entered clearly into the ears of every single person present. Duan Lingtian, our Supreme Elder thinks highly of you, and that's why he wants to take you as his disciple. Don't be ungrateful. Instantly, many members of the demonic Lotus Blade sect in the surroundings snapped at Duan Lingtian. At the same time that Long Wei, Shui Rui, and the demonic Lotus Blade sect elders snapped at Duan Lingtian, they couldn't help but feel fortunate in their hearts, fortunate that Duan Lingtian didn't agree. Unknowingly, a wisp of a smile had appeared on the corners of their mouths as they were able to sense the rage that rose ceaselessly on the Supreme Elder. Whoosh! Origin energy gradually arose in Jia Hong, who sat cross-legged on the lotus seat not too far away from Duan Lingtian, and then it started to become raging and leaping about. At the same time, the energy of heaven and earth roiled in the sky above him as numerous lifelike ancient horned dragon silhouettes condensed into form and coiled down from above. 10 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. 20 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. 30 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. The number of ancient horned dragon silhouettes was still rising unceasingly. Third level of the void interpretation stage, fourth level, fifth level, it's still increasing. Qin Zhang's expression became more and unsightly. The body of Mo Yu, who stood at the side, shivered as his pupils constricted, and there was only a single thought that remained in his heart. We're finished, we're finished. Even though he was mentally prepared since long ago, never have he imagined that the strength of the 1,000-year-old freak from demonic Lotus Blade sect would actually be so terrifying. Finally, the ancient horned dragon silhouettes in the sky above Jia Yang didn't increase anymore. Meanwhile, 100 lifelike ancient horned dragon silhouettes were clearly visible before the eyes of every single person present, and it gave them a strong visual impact. The strength of 100 ancient horned dragons, the 7th level of the void interpretation stage. Long Wei couldn't help but gasp. No wonder Supreme Elder said he can lead our demonic Lotus Blade sect to obtain a position in the Darken Dynasty. With Supreme Elder's current strength, there are probably only a few people that are a match for him in the Darken Dynasty. Shui Rui was extremely excited as his body trembled lights, and he'd slightly lost his composure. Supreme Elder, At the same time, no matter if it was the group of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples standing in midair or the disciples standing within the gorge, all of them couldn't help but seethe with excitement. They were naturally extremely clear about what 100 ancient horned dragon silhouettes meant. The 7th level of the void interpretation stage. Their Supreme Elder was actually a formidable existence at the 7th level of the void interpretation stage. Everyone was excited. Little fellow, I'll ask you one last time, are you really unwilling to take me as your master? Jia Hong, who had a 100 ancient horned dragon silhouettes above him, stared at Duan Lingtian with a gaze that was like a bolt of lightning, and he seemed as if he would directly make a move against Duan Lingtian if anything wasn't to his liking. Duan Lingtian's expression still remained the same when facing Jia Hong, who revealed a strength at the 7th level of the void interpretation stage, and ridiculed. Old fellow, did you think I'll be afraid of you and even directly take you as my master just because you revealed its strength at the 7th level of the void interpretation stage? Since it's like this, then you can go to hell. Jia Hong's patience was completely exhausted, and he couldn't restrain himself any longer. He shouted out explosively before his sleeve flashed as he raised his hand, and a deafening howl of the wind exploded out. In practically an instant, waves of terrifying gales swept out from the place Jia Hong stood, and it blew out in all directions to the point of causing some demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples with low cultivations to move back in retreat. Whoosh! Jia Hong pushed out his palm, and it seemed to be slow yet was extremely swift. In the blink of an eye, his palm was already extremely close to Duan Lingtian's chest, and so long as he continued forward, Duan Lingtian would die for sure. Right at this critical moment. Ah! A shrill cry appeared out of thin air, and it caused the smile that had suffused the faces of Long Wei and the other higher-ups of the demonic Lotus Blade sect to instantly freeze. Originally, they were already able to foresee the scene of Duan Lingtian being killed. But right at the instant Duan Lingtian was about to die, they saw to their shock that at this moment, the arm of their demonic Lotus Blade sect's supreme elder, the ancestor that had established the demonic Lotus Blade sect more than 1,000 years ago had used to attack Duan Lingtian was severed, and his severed arm was thrown out by momentum to vanish into the distance in the blink of an eye, whereas, the place Duan Lingtian stood at earlier was completely empty now. At this moment, Duan Lingtian had suddenly soared up into the sky, and there was a fiery red figure by his side. This was a middle-aged man with a cold and dignified expression, his sharp eyes seemed to look down upon the heavens and the earth, and he emitted a formidable sense of pressure as he stood there with his hands behind his back. "Who are you?" After Jia Hong stopped the blood that sprayed from the place his arm was severed, he had a rather pale countenance as he looked at the middle-aged man in fiery red-colored clothes and asked with slight terror. Earlier, it was precisely this person that had severed his arm. This person hasn't utilized a spirit weapon when making a move against him, and the middle-aged man had only used pure origin energy that was condensed into the form of a sword to easily sever his arm before he could react. Even though the middle-aged man attacked in a flash and the ancient horned dragon silhouettes in the sky couldn't condense in time, Jia Hong could be completely sure that the fiery red-clothed middle-aged man before him possessed a strength that far surpassed him. Meanwhile, the gazes of everyone in the demonic Lotus Blade sect descended onto the red-clothed middle-aged man. They'd noticed this red-clothed middle-aged man since long ago as he'd always stood close behind Duan Lingtian with another red-clothed young woman and a grey-clothed old man. Originally, these people were survivors of the Seven-Star Sword sect as well. But now, they realized that they were wrong, extremely wrong. Would a survivor of the Seven-Star Sword sect possess the strength to sever the arm of their demonic Lotus Blade sect's supreme elder, a dignified 7th-level void interpretation stage expert? If the Seven-Star Sword sect possessed such an expert, how could it have been annihilated by them? "Senior, this is an enmity between us and the Seven-Star Sword sect. I hope that Senior doesn't interfere. If Senior has any needs, our demonic Lotus Blade sect will spend every effort, and I guarantee that Senior will be satisfied." As the sect leader of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, Long Wei was an astute person, and he clearly noticed the terror that suffused Jia Hong's eyes when Jia Hong looked at the red-clothed middle-aged man. So, he chose to make concessions in order to gain an advantage. 728 Chapter 729, Covered in Blood. Unfortunately, the red-clothed middle-aged man seemed as if he'd utterly not heard Jia Hong and Long Wei as he spoke indifferently. "Lingtian, do you want me to cripple his cultivation before you kill him yourself, or do you want me to end him directly?" The red-clothed middle-aged man was precisely Feng Wudao, the eldest master of the Darken Dynasty's Feng clan and the number-one expert in the Feng clan that stood supreme above the two ancestors of the clan. Feng Wudao's tone was calm, and it was as if he was speaking of a trivial matter. Jia Hong's expression went completely pale when he heard Feng Wudao, whereas, the pupils of Long Wei and the others constricted instantly as well. Exactly who is this red-clothed middle-aged man? He actually seems as if he utterly doesn't take our demonic Lotus Blade sect's 7th-level void interpretation stage supreme elder seriously. He wasn't present when the 7-Star Sword sect was annihilated that day. "Uncle Feng, I'll trouble you with it." Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Jia Hong before speaking slowly. Even though Duan Lingtian didn't provide a direct choice, but his words had obviously made a choice indirectly, and Feng Wudao had discerned the meaning within. Jia Hong's expression went ghastly pale when he saw Feng Wudao nodding, and he instantly stood up from the lotus seat. Bang! With a raise of his leg, Jia Hong's origin energy skyrocketed as his fire concept erupted out like a shadow behind it, and it caused his origin energy to seem as if it had transformed into a ball of flames that fiercely crashed onto the lotus seat. Instantly, the lotus seat condensed into form from origin energy and fire concept instantly shattered and transformed into nothingness. Swoosh! At the same time, Jia Hong had already relied on the force of this impact to shoot towards the distance like a bolt of lightning, and he obviously wanted to flee. The scene before them only occurred in the blink of an eye, and everyone from the demonic Lotus Blade sect, including the sect leader Long Wei, didn't even have the time to react. Swish! A sword hell that appeared for a brief moment entered clearly into the ears of the group of martial artists at the Void Initiation stage or above and possessed shocking hearing ability, whereas, martial artists below the Void Initiation stage seemed to have heard nothing, and then they saw the distant figure stop for a moment before splitting into two. Jia Hong, who had fled, was split into two from up to down, and his severed corpse crashed onto the ground while accompanied by dazzling and resplendent blood that covered the sky. Silence. No matter if it was in the sky or on the ground, the entire ground was in deathly silence. Ancestor. Supreme Elder. Everyone from the demonic Lotus Blade sect was dumbstruck in unison as they looked at the severed corpse on the distant ground, and their faces were filled with disbelief. On one hand, they were in disbelief that their ancestor would run away from battle and abandon them for the sake of living, and on the other hand, they were in disbelief that the Supreme Elder who seemed high, mighty, and matchless in their eyes would be killed so easily. But these numerous scenes that occurred before their eyes charged at their tensed nerves at every moment, and it told them that all of this was real. I'll leave the rest to you. Feng Wudao nodded to Duan Lingtian before vanishing on the spot, and when he appeared once more, he'd already returned to Elder Kong and Feng Tianwu's side. From the beginning until the end, Feng Wudao's expression remained unmoving like the water within an ancient well, and he seemed as if killing a 7th-level void interpretation stage expert was nothing to him. Okay, Duan Lingtian nodded, and then he revealed a frenzied smile as he pounced towards all the demonic Lotus Blade sect higher-ups led by Long Wei like a tiger that pounced into a pack of wolves. Sword drawing arts. A violet-colored sword light that flashed briefly in the sky easily swiped past Shui Rui's throat, and the sect leader of the formed Snow Moon sect had died just like this at Duan Lingtian's hands. Duan Lingtian held his sword as she stood in the sky, and drops of blood dripped ceaselessly from atop his sword as he thought in his heart. The collection has just begun. Shui Rui's death was like the wick of a candle, and it instantly jolted Long Wei and the others awake. Since it's impossible to flee, then we'll join forces and kill him. Long Wei glanced fearfully at Feng Wudao who stood in the distance before shouting out explosively to call over all the higher-ups of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Whoosh! But right when they were intending to make a move against Duan Lingtian, they unintentionally noticed the over 30 ancient horned dragon silhouettes that had appeared in the sky above Duan Lingtian, and it caused them to be flabbergasted. The strongest person amongst them only possessed the strength of over 10 ancient horned dragons when exerting his full might, and it was to the extent that not a single person possessed the strength of 20 ancient horned dragons. He isn't at the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage, he's at the 9th. This demonic Lotus Blade sect's elder's gaze had always been on Duan Lingtian, and he'd clearly witnessed the scene of the numerous ancient horned dragon silhouettes condensing into form one by one in the sky above Duan Lingtian. 9th level of the Void Initiation stage. A single sentence from this elder caused all the higher-ups including Long Wei to go pale, and all of them stopped moving, as they didn't dare take a step forward. If Duan Lingtian was only at the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage, they might have been capable of dealing with him after joining forces. But a 9th level Void Initiation stage martial artist wasn't someone they could go against. Duan Lingtian, I'm willing to join your 7-star sword sect and give both my life and loyalty to the 7-star sword sect. Suddenly, a guardian elder stood out and spoke to Duan Lingtian with panic. Instantly, the expression of many demonic Lotus Blade sect higher-ups including Long Wei went livid, and they glared angrily at the guardian elder. Swish! A sword light that appeared briefly in the sky easily penetrated the throat of this guardian elder. When the guardian elder held tightly onto his throat, a violet-colored figure had appeared before him like a shadow, and it was precisely Duan Lingtian. Why? The guardian elder looked at Duan Lingtian with a puzzled and dazed expression, and his eyes were filled with unwillingness. As far as he was concerned, he'd already submitted and was willing to join the 7-star sword sect. Logically speaking, Duan Lingtian ought to not kill him and welcome him into the 7-star sword sect instead. He was convinced that the current 7-star sword sect surely required experts to hold down the fort, and it was precisely because of this that when facing life and death, he chose to endure a bad name and join the 7-star sword sect. But unexpectedly, Duan Lingtian seemed to be utterly disdainful towards allowing him to join the 7-star sword sect and had directly killed him. I won't allow anyone whose hands are tainted with the disciples of my 7-star sword sect to live in this world. Duan Lingtian spoke indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian flashed out. Whirlwind. He vanished on the spot, and when he appeared once again, he was already amidst the demonic Lotus Blade sect higher-ups, and every single sword strike that flashed out took the life of a demonic Lotus Blade sect higher-up. Since only death awaits us no matter what we do, then let's fight with our lives. Kill, the group of demonic Lotus Blade sect higher-ups and disciples that had participated in the annihilation of the 7-star sword sect all those years ago charged towards Duan Lingtian as if they'd gone mad. The fate of resisting was death, yet the fate of not resisting was death as well. So they chose to resist. But they didn't have the slightest ability to strike back when facing Duan Lingtian, and all of them died one by one beneath Duan Lingtian's sword. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian was numbed by the slaughter. Sect leader, are you watching? I'm making the demonic Lotus Blade sect, Origin Convergence sect, and Snow Moon sect repay 100-fold for what they owed us. The figure of the former 7-star sword sect's leader, Linggu Jinhong, flashed within Duan Lingtian's mind. Even though he didn't have a long relationship with Linggu Jinhong, the numerous ways Linggu Jinhong supported and thought highly of him caused Duan Lingtian to be moved. As the saying goes, a woman will doll herself up for the man she loves, just like a gentleman will die for the one that recognized his worth. Linggu Jinhong was a person that recognized his worth. Swish! A violet-colored sword light that flashed briefly in the sky had penetrated Long Wei's chest easily, and it came out from the other side, causing instantaneous death. As soon as Long Wei died, many people were completely devoid of battle intent, and they fled in unison. Whoosh! Whoosh! Meanwhile, the Rock and Qin Shang joined the fray, and they slaughtered all the higher-ups of disciples of the demonic Lotus Blade sect that were fleeing for their lives and devoid of battle intent. Under the circumstances that Duan Lingtian was suppressing all the 6th-level Void Initiation stage martial artists of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, the two of them slaughtered their way unopposed in the crowd of demonic Lotus Blade sect members. Peak Master Gen Fan, if you're conscious in the heavens, then watch as I take revenge for you. The sword in Duan Lingtian's hand struck out to kill a 6th-level Void Initiation stage elder of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Elder Bai, your little phase master, yet I wasn't able to protect you properly. I really don't know how to tell little Fei when I see her in the future. A beautiful woman's figure appeared in Duan Lingtian's mind as he revealed a wisp of sorrow, and the sword in his hand killed another 6th-level Void Initiation stage guardian elder of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Senior Sister Zhuo Qing, all of you as well. Numerous familiar figures flashed within Duan Lingtian's mind. In the past, all of these people were alive and standing before him, yet they'd died 5 years ago at the hands of these people before his eyes. Swish, 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 swish. At this moment, Duan Lingtian seemed to have transformed into a bloodthirsty asura, and there was nothing but slaughter in his world. It wasn't long before all the demonic Lotus Blade sect higher-ups at the 4th level of the Void Initiation stage or above had fallen. Duan Lingtian didn't stop because of this, and the sword in his hand pointed towards the other higher-ups and disciples of the demonic Lotus Blade sect as he flashed out to slaughter them mercilessly. Shrill cries rose and fell without end. No, spare me, spare me. Duan Lingtian, I'm willing to be your slave, just spare me, spare me. Everywhere Duan Lingtian passed, all the higher-ups and disciples of the demonic Lotus Blade sect were without the slightest intent to battle and fled in all directions, and they didn't forget to beg mournfully with mercy as they fled. But Duan Lingtian disregarded them. A debt of blood must be paid with blood. Unknowingly, the violet clothed on Duan Lingtian had been completely tainted by blood, causing him to seem as if he'd become a person made of blood. Of course, there wasn't a single drop of his blood amongst this blood. Brother Duan's intent to slaughter is too heavy. Elder Kong frowned as he looked at Duan Lingtian's figure that was covered in blood from afar. It isn't good if this goes on, it's very likely that he'll experience chi deviation. He needs to vent now, it's useless even if we stop him. We can only hope that he can keep his heart firm. Feng Wudao sighed. Big brother Duan, I'll help you. A wisp of worry appeared on Feng Tianwu's peerlessly beautiful face when she heard the conversation between Elder Kong and Feng Wudao, and then she flashed out to go help Duan Lingtian kill. For his sake, she was willing to share the sins of slaughter without the slightest regret. 729 Chapter 730, The Descent of Lightning as Punishment. Blood flowed into rivers within the entire gorge. The rays of the setting sun seemed blood-red as they made the blood that tainted the gorge to become more prominent, and it seemed as if only one color remained within the entire world, and it was a dazzling and resplendent scarlet red. Unknowingly, the commotion and shrill cries had already vanished. A group of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples stood within the gorge with terrified expressions as they looked at the 4 figures in the sky that were like gods of slaughter, and their legs seemed as if they were filled with lead, causing it to be difficult to move in the slightest. They didn't dare flee, because they knew they were unable. Perhaps they had the chance of escaping death if they stood here. As the wind blew by, an extremely dense smell of blood pierced into their nostrils, causing their expressions to go pale, and their bodies shivered. Suddenly, a figure descended from the sky. This was a young man whose clothes were completely tainted with blood, and the sword within his hand was still dripping with blood, causing him to seem like a peerless god of slaughter. The demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples went ghastly pale when they saw the young man in bloodied clothes approaching. It was precisely this person that had wiped out the 3 great sect leaders of their demonic Lotus Blade sect, and the other few 6th level Void Initiation stage Guardian Elders had died one by one at his hands as well. The other elders and the senior disciples of the sect had all died at the hands of the companions by this young man's side. Duan Lingtian stood at a low altitude in the air above the gorge, and he looked down upon the survivors of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Feng Tianwu and Qin Shang followed like a shadow behind him, whereas, the rock even followed by his side and ceaselessly flapped his wings that were like clouds that covered the sky, as his sharp eyes stared at the remaining demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples. All of you that were already disciples of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, Origin Convergence sect, and Snow Moon sect before the Azure Forest Tri-sect annihilated my 7-star sword sect, stand out from the group. Duan Lingtian spoke indifferently, and his voice seemed calm, yet actually contained killing intent. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, many people went ghastly pale. These people were already members of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, Origin Convergence sect, and Snow Moon sect 5 years ago, and some of them had even participated in the annihilation of the 7-star sword sect. Now when Duan Lingtian asked them to step out, they were naturally able to guess what intentions Duan Lingtian held. So none of them dared stand out. 10 breaths of time, I'll give all of you 10 breaths of time. Duan Lingtian continued. If no one stands out after 10 breaths of time, then all of you will die. When his calm words entered into the ears of the demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples, and it was like a voodoo chant that caused their faces to go pale. For a time, the demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples were in disorder. A disciple that joined the Azure Forest Tri-sect later on pointed towards another person by his side and said, I know you were already a Snow Moon sect disciple before the 7-star sword sect was annihilated, go out quickly, don't get all of us killed. Instantly, it drew public outrage. Go out. Go out, quickly, For a time, this person became a common target of everyone, and in the end, he walked out of the crowd with long face and stood alone outside. There's still another 7 breaths of time. Duan Lingtian continued. I remember you as well, you were an Origin Convergence sect disciple 5 years ago. Get out. Get out. 4 years ago, when I'd just arrived at the Azure Forest Tri-sect, you were flaunting before me about how many 7-star sword sect disciples you killed. In next to no time, almost 100 people were pushed out from the crowd of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples, whereas, the countenance of the almost 100 people were extremely pale, and as they stood outside the crowd, their bodies shivered as if they had already guessed their fate. The time of 10 breaths is up. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto the almost 100 people that were pushed out, and the billowing killing intent on his body swept out to envelop them. Instantly, the expressions of these people went deathly pale. Duan Lingtian, don't kill me. Don't kill me, even though I was a Snow Moon sect disciple since long ago, but I didn't head over to the 7-star sword sect on that day. Me too, I've never been to the 7-star sword sect, spare me. More than half of the almost 100 people that were pushed out started speaking out in panic with pleas of injustice. But Duan Lingtian utterly paid no attention to them. At this moment, he would rather kill someone wrongly than let anyone off. Otherwise, he would let down the numerous souls of the deceased from the 7-star sword sect. Whoosh! Mo Yu, who'd been watching the events since the beginning, had descended to Duan Lingtian's side at this moment. Senior brother, leave them to me. Duan Lingtian didn't refuse Mo Yu's offer to undertake the task at hand. Go ahead. He knew clearly in his heart that Mo Yu was unable to endure since long ago. When they made a move to deal with the higher-ups and void-prying stage disciples of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, he'd once sent a voice transmission to restrict Mo Yu from joining in the battle, as he wouldn't allow anything to happen to Mo Yu. Mo Yu was the future hope of the 7-star sword sect. Presently, the almost 100 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples before him were martial artists that hadn't even stepped into the void-prying stage, so they were incapable of posing any threat to Mo Yu. Mo Yu ought to vent his feelings now. Mo Yu's eyes lit up when he obtained Duan Lingtian's permission, and a spirit sword appeared in his hand as he flashed out like a shooting star that descended towards the demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples. 7-star sword technique. Mo Yu directly executed the sect-guarding sword skill of the 7-star sword sect, and 7 material sword lights whistled out to kill 7 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples in the blink of an eye. As the closed-door disciple of the former 7-star sword sect's leader, Linggu Jinhong, and coupled with Duan Lingtian being not inclined to take the position of sect leader, Linggu Jinhong had fostered Mo Yu as the next sect leader of the 7-star sword sect long ago. When Linggu Jinhong had passed the minor 7-star sword technique to Mo Yu, he'd already passed the 7-star sword technique to Mo Yu as well. Mo Yu didn't disappoint Linggu Jinhong's high hopes, and had smoothly cultivated the 7-star sword technique to the mastery stage under the guidance of Qin Shang during these past few years. Swish, 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 along with Mo Yu attacking, 7 sword lights formed into a group that flashed out as if it had transformed into the scythe of the god of death, and every single sword light took the life of a demonic Lotus Blade sect disciple. The crowd of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples either fought Mo Yu with their lives or flew for their lives, yet none of them were capable of escaping the same fate. In a short amount of time, the almost 100 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples that were well and living had fallen to the ground, causing blood to flow into rivers. Thump! Under the gazes of everyone present, Mo Yu knelt on the ground that was tainted in blood as 2 streams of tears flowed from his eyes, and he looked up into the western sky as he said with a loud voice, "Master, are you watching? I've taken revenge for you and taken revenge for all the peak masters, elders, and senior and junior brothers and sisters. All of you can rest in peace in the afterlife." After he finished speaking, Mo Yu made 3 resounding kowtows on the ground before standing up once again. "All of the remaining people must establish a vow with your blood. If any of you had joined the demonic Lotus Blade sect, Snow Moon sect, or Origin Convergence sect 5 years ago, then you'll be blasted to death by the 9 heavenly tribulation." Duan Lingtian's fierce gaze descended onto all the remaining demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples as he spoke with a low voice. Instantly, many people in the group of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples went pale. These people were disciples that had joined the 3 great sects 5 years ago, yet they didn't take step out themselves earlier, nor did the surrounding demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples know of their history, so they'd escaped the earlier calamity. They thought that they would be able to survive, yet never had they imagined that Duan Lingtian would be so vigilant and ask them to establish a vow under the 9 heavenly tribulation. Of course, some people held hopes of being lucky in their hearts, and they felt that establishing a vow was nothing great. Even though the 9 heavenly tribulation was the publicly acknowledged oath tribulation of Cloud Continent, but the 9 heavenly tribulation was only an illusory legend to most people. They didn't think that an oath tribulation could do anything to them, whereas, these people quickly found out how naive their thinking was. Along with numerous drops of blood charging into the sky and numerous vows escaping the mouths of the remaining demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples, waves of continuous thunderclaps sounded out in the horizon. The thunderclaps grew in frequency and seemed like firecrackers. As soon as all the demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples finished speaking, balls of dark clouds condensed at the horizon, and they arrived in the sky above the gorge in a short moment before ceaselessly converging together. Violet-colored bolts of lightning surged and crackled ceaselessly atop the balls of dark clouds, and it seemed as if it was brewing something. Punishment lightning clouds have descended, many people are going to be struck with misfortune. Elder Kong, who saw this scene from high up in the air, couldn't help but shake his head and smile. Brother Duan is really intelligent. He even knows to use this method to determine if there are any people in the remaining group of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples that avoided being killed earlier. Now, he didn't even have to make a move himself against those people that avoided death earlier. The son-in-law of Feng Wudao, is naturally no ordinary person. Feng Wudao spoke indifferently. His words seemed as if Duan Lingtian had already married Feng Tianwu and officially became his son-in-law. Bang, 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 bang. Numerous tribulation lightning bolts that were thick as a bucket tore through the sky as they descended towards the demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples that avoided death earlier before blasting them into ash, and it wiped out any trace of them in this world. At the moment of death, only a single thought remained in the minds of these demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples. The oath tribulation of legend is real. If anyone dared to be hopeful while vowing before the oath tribulation, then that person would die for sure. The remaining group of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples went pale when they saw over 10 fellow disciples being struck into ash, and some with low mental endurance even fell limply and started shivering on the ground. The scene from before was enough to become a nightmare for their entire lifetimes. Over 10 bolts of tribulation lightning that were thick as a bucket descended right before them, and it blasted the living people by their sides earlier into ash. The legends are true, a person that goes against the oath made under the heavenly tribulation will indeed be blasted to death by the 9 heavenly tribulation. Looks like they were being hopeful when they made the vow earlier. The remaining few hundreds of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples whispered in discussions, and their words were filled with fear towards the oath tribulation. All of you, FK off. Duan Ling Tian glanced indifferently at the remaining demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples as he spoke indifferently. Even though he'd killed many people, but he'd killed people that deserved death. Killing these hundreds of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples was as easy as a flip of the hand to Duan Ling Tian, yet Duan Ling Tian didn't do it. These demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples weren't disciples of the Azure Forest Tri-sect that had participated in the battle 5 years ago that annihilated the 7-star sword sect, so they didn't deserve death. As soon as Duan Ling Tian finished speaking and when the crowd of demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples hadn't recovered from their shock, there were 2 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples that were the first to recover from their shock, and they glanced at each other before kneeling on the ground and speaking respectfully. Lord Duan Ling Tian, we want to join the 7-star sword sect. 730 Chapter 731, The Dust Settles. Duan Ling Tian glanced at the 2 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples that knelt on the ground before he said indifferently, my 7-star sword sect doesn't accept turncoats, since the both of you are able to turn on the demonic Lotus Blade sect today, then you'll be able to turn on my 7-star sword sect in the future. Lord Duan Ling Tian, right when he thought the 2 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples would retreat in the face what he said, the 2 of them had persisted instead, and they pinched open their finger before a drop of blood charged into the sky. I'm willing to take a vow with my own blood that so long as Lord Duan Ling Tian is willing to allow me to join the 7-star sword sect, then I'll surely live and die with the 7-star sword sect and never betray it forever. If I go against this vow, then I'm willing to be struck to death by the 9 heavenly tribulation. The 2 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples vowed at the same time. Meanwhile, a wave of deafening thunderclaps resounded out from the horizon. Obviously, it was the oath tribulation bearing witness to their vow. Duan Ling Tian's brows raised as everything before him had exceeded his expectations. Never had he imagined that these 2 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples would be so persistent to the point of vowing under the 9 heavenly tribulation, and for a time, he couldn't help but become hesitant. Truthfully speaking, he subconsciously discriminated against these members of the demonic Lotus Blade sect, and it was because of nothing else but his detest of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Mo Yu, what do you think? Duan Ling Tian looked at Mo Yu and asked. He was only a passerby to the 7-star sword sect, and Mo Yu was the leader of the 7-star sword sect from today onwards, and the future of the 7-star sword sect was completely borne by him. Mo Yu pondered slightly. Senior brother, since they've already vowed under the oath tribulation, I presume it's impossible for them to be disloyal to our 7-star sword sect. Presently, our 7-star sword sect has just been rebuilt and is at the moment that we require people the most. So, I feel that we can accept them as disciples of the 7-star sword sect. Okay, then we'll do as you said. Duan Ling Tian nodded. The 2 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples said hurriedly, thank you, Lord Mo Yu. HMPH. But, Duan Ling Tian's cold snort caused them to feel as if they were sitting on a carpet of needles. Right when the 2 demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples were perturbed, Duan Ling Tian spoke indifferently. Remember this, he's the sect leader of the 7-star sword sect. Thank you, sect leader. Even though they were curious why the 7-star sword sect leader wasn't Duan Ling Tian, but they didn't dare dally in the slightest when they heard this, and they hurriedly apologized to Mo Yu. Senior brother, I feel that you're more suitable to be the 7-star sword sect's leader. Mo Yu said with a bitter smile on his face, I'm only at the void prying stage now, so how can I undertake the great responsibility of being the 7-star sword sect's leader? Why can't you undertake it with the help of Elder Peng and Peak Master Qin Shang? Duan Ling Tian neither agreed nor disagreed instead, and he spoke decisively. This matter is decided, you're the closed-door disciple of sect leader Lingu and the next inheritor of the position of sect leader of the 7-star sword sect that he'd decided on. The position of sect leader in the 7-star sword sect can only be yours. As for me, I won't be staying in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom in the future. As he finished speaking, Duan Ling Tian added. Mo Yu, I'll pass the heavy responsibility of the 7-star sword sect to you, I hope you don't disappoint your master. Duan Ling Tian spoke solemnly to Mo Yu. Don't worry senior brother, I'll surely try my best. Mo Yu spoke hurriedly. Lord Duan Lingtian, sect leader Mo Yu, were willing to join the 7-star sword sect as well. Right at this moment, the remaining demonic Lotus Blade sect disciples hurriedly knelt on the floor and vowed under the oath tribulation after they saw the actions of the 2 disciples from before. As for the content of their vows, it was similar to the vow taken by the 2 disciples from before. For a time, deafening thunderclaps resounded in the horizon. Even though they'd made such a vow that caused them to not only be unable to betray the 7-star sword sect for their entire lives, they even had to live and die with the 7-star sword sect, but they didn't regret it. When they joined the Azure Forest Tri-sect in the past, it was mostly because they wanted to find a strong power to rely on while striving to become outstanding. Now the Azure Forest Tri-sect was gone, and an even stronger 7-star sword sect was right before their eyes. So they chose to join the 7-star sword sect and seek an even better future. Mo Yu, you deal with the matters here, Peak Master Qin Shang, Elder Peng. Mo Yu is still young, I hope that both of you can guide him in the future. Duan Lingtian spoke to Mo Yu before turning to look at Qin Shang and Elder Peng. Qin Shang and Elder Peng nodded. Don't worry, Mo Yu is the 7-star sword sect's leader, and I'm his martial aunt. I'll naturally try my best to support him to become a qualified sect leader, said Qin Shang. Okay, Duan Lingtian nodded, and then he said, since it's like this, then I'll be leaving first. Senior brother, where are you going? Mo Yu couldn't help but ask when he heard Duan Lingtian wanted to leave. I'll search the surroundings to see if there are any survivors of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. After that, I'll return to my hometown, and I'll return to the 7-star sword sect after that, said Duan Lingtian. Senior brother, the 9 great spirit points of our 7-star sword sect have been completely destroyed, and it probably has to experience an extremely long amount of time before being capable of accumulating spirit energy once more. Shouldn't we move our 7-star sword sect to the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge, and the location of the Snow Moon sect and Origin Convergence sect? Mo Yu couldn't help but asked. There's no need. Duan Lingtian shook his head. Our 7-star sword sect will still be at the 7 great sword peaks, just bring all of them back. Besides that, recall senior brother Zheng Song and the disciples of the 7-star sword sect that are wandering about outside once you get back. After I return from my hometown, I'll find a way to move all the spirit points that remain in the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge, Origin Convergence sect, and Snow Moon sect to our 7-star sword sect. Duan Lingtian finished speaking in a single breath. Move the spirit points. Not only had Duan Lingtian's words caused Mo Yu, Qin Shang, Elder Peng, and the group of 7-star sword sect disciples that had just joined the sect to be stunned, even Feng Wudao, Feng Tianwu, and Elder Kong couldn't help but be stunned. Senior brother, are you really able to move the spirit points? Mo Yu took a deep breath and couldn't refrain from asking. As far as he was concerned, this was truly unbelievable. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded, and then his gaze raised as his figure flashed out to collect the spatial rings of Long Wei, Lu Yuan, and Shui Rui. After he dripped his blood on them to establish ownership, he collected the origin drawing pearls within, and it was a total of 18. I truly never imagined that Long Wei was capable of finding so many origin drawing pearls. Even if it's in the foreign lands, this origin drawing pearls can be considered to be rare things. After he put away the origin drawing pearls, Duan Lingtian removed his ownership on the 3 spatial rings and tossed them to Mo Yu. All of you can collect the remaining spoils of the battle, let's leave this place first. As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian notified Feng Wudao's group of 3 before the 4 of them flew out to make a circle around the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge. After following some clues to kill some survivors of the demonic Lotus Blade sect that had left not long ago, the 4 of them continued south. Swoosh! The enormous sword sailed across the sky as it carried Duan Lingtian's group of 4, and they only spent a day before arriving in the sky above the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Duan Lingtian silently looked down at the city beneath him. Even though in the eyes of Duan Lingtian who'd seen world, this Crimson Sky Kingdom's imperial city was no different than a small and remote city, it was precisely this city that caused him to be unable to restrain waves of ripples of excitement from emerging in his heart. Nervousness as one approached home after a long time was a saying that spoke precisely about Duan Lingtian's current state. An entire 4 years had passed since he left the Crimson Sky Kingdom the last time. It's been 4 years, I wonder how father and mother are. Duan Lingtian carried an excited mood as all of them descended outside the imperial city. They didn't fly in directly. According to what Feng Tianwu said, it would allow them to merge better into the imperial city. Of course, the reason she thought this way was because this place was Duan Lingtian's hometown, and she wanted to get to know Duan Lingtian's hometown. Besides Duan Lingtian, who was feeling nervous from approaching home and didn't discern the deep meaning within Feng Tianwu's words, Feng Wudao and Elder Kong guessed what Feng Tianwu was thinking. Especially Elder Kong, his weird gaze caused Feng Tianwu to blush from embarrassment, and she glared repeatedly at Elder Kong as if she was threatening Elder Kong that he was not allowed to say any further. The Crimson Sky Kingdom's imperial city was divided into the outer city and inner city. When they walked into the outer city and felt the bustling atmosphere on the streets, Duan Lingtian seemed to have returned to the time he'd just left Aurora City and arrived at the imperial city. Needless to say, Duan Lingtian's group's luck wasn't bad, and after they had a meal in the outer city, the gate to the inner city had already opened up slowly. Of course, even if the inner city wasn't opened, they could directly fly in. However, the feeling of walking in was completely different. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's group of 4 slowly stepped into the inner city. Young master, look quickly, my god. I've never seen such a beauty in all my life. Even though I've never seen our imperial city's #1 beauty, Princess Bai Yao, but I dare be certain that she's absolutely not inferior to Princess Bai Yao. In the distance, the gaze of the servant at the side of a young man in embroidered clothes that rode a large horse glowed as he stared at Duan Lingtian's group of 4 in the distance. More precisely speaking, he was staring at Feng Tianwu. Feng Tianwu didn't cover her face with a veil like before, and her peerlessly beautiful face could be said to have drawn numerous burning gazes all along the way. But because of the extraordinary aura that was imperceptibly revealed by Duan Lingtian, Feng Wudao, and Elder Kong, it caused some lascivious men that intended to strike up a conversation with her to stop far away. The young man in embroidered clothes looked along the gaze of the servant when he heard this, and with a single glance, his gaze couldn't move away any longer. Heavens! There's actually such a beauty in the world. Beauty that made flowers blush and made the moon hide, beauty that made fishes sink and geese fall out from the sky, all of this was insufficient to describe the drop-dead gorgeous appearance of the young woman before him. The young woman's flawlessness caused his heartbeat to abruptly quicken. Intense desire of possession emerged and sprawled out within his heart. Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu walked side by side. At this moment, his feelings had calmed down, and he was chatting happily with Feng Tianwu on the street. Young miss. A sudden voice interrupted Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu's idle chats. Subsequently, a large horse obstructed Duan Lingtian and Feng Tianwu's path, and the young man in embroidered clothes that sat on it was staring at Feng Tianwu with a gaze that was filled with greed and the desire to possess her. 731 Chapter 732, Embroidered Uniform Guard. Duan Lingtian. Feng Tianwu's beautiful face that carried a slight smile was instantly covered in a layer of frost when she felt the gaze of the young man in embroidered clothes that wasn't concealed in the slightest. Strands of rage even leapt about in the depths of her eyes that were beautiful like jade pearls. Young miss, I've been taken with you with a single glance, how about you have a cup of tea with me? The young man brazenly sized Feng Tianwu up, and the almost flawless graceful figure of Feng Tianwu caused the greed within his eyes to grow deeper. He just didn't make a move to seize her right away. As for these 3 people by your side, you, help this young master properly entertain these 3 guests, and you must be courteous, do you understand? The young man looked towards the servant by his side as he spoke. Yes, young master. The servant seemed to be quite used to this, and he agreed before looking at Duan Lingtian, Feng Wudao, and Elder Kong and said indifferently, come with me. Scram! Right at this moment, Feng Tianwu, whose face was covered in a ladder of cold lights, had finally spoken, and her voice was chilly, as if it made the surrounding air become slightly icy cold. The servant that assumed a haughty air couldn't help but be stunned, whereas, the gaze of the young man in embroidered clothes lit up instead, and he couldn't refrain from laughing. It's been so long since I've encountered such a charming woman, young miss, I'm really liking you more and more. Didn't you hear her asking you to FK off? Right when the air in the surroundings of Feng Tianwu was roiling swiftly and the origin energy in her body seemed ready to gush out, Duan Lingtian took a step forward and lightly held onto Feng Tianwu's hand to calm down her rage as he spoke out in a languid tone. Kid, I'm talking to this young miss, what are you interjecting for? If it wasn't for this young miss, I'd make you incapable to speak right now. The young man's face sank as he stared at Duan Lingtian with a ruthless gaze, and there was no lack of threats within his words. HMPH. No matter how good a person was, there was still a time that he would become enraged, and Duan Lingtian's face sank when facing the repeated provocation and nagging. Then he took a step forward before casually striking out with a punch. The punch struck the space before him, causing the air flow to be condensed instantly, and a terrifying wave of air swept forward. Bang! An ear-piercing explosion of the air resounded out. The horse beneath the young man remained unmoving, whereas, the young man himself was blasted out over 10 meters away to heavily fall with his face flat on the ground. The surrounding people that passed by couldn't help but laugh when they saw this scene. The young man, who was in an exceedingly sorry state, emitted shrill cries, and he looked at Duan Lingtian with an extremely gloomy expression when he heard the laughter coming from the surroundings. "You actually dare hit me? No matter who you are, you're dead." Presently, the expression of the servant went grim as well, and he hurriedly got off his horse to charge towards the young man. "Young master, are you all right? Let's go." Duan Lingtian seemed as if nothing had happened as he lightly smiled and spoke to Feng Tianwu. Feng Tianwu nodded and similarly didn't take the threats of the young man seriously. There wasn't an existence in this small imperial kingdom that could pose a threat to her. Duan Lingtian's group of 4 continued to head towards the inner city. As for their destination, it was precisely the private courtyard house that belonged to Duan Lingtian in the inner city. After walked for around half an hour. "It's him, cousin brother, he injured me." An exasperated voice sounded out from behind Duan Lingtian's group of 4. The young man in embroidered clothes who'd suffered a loss at Duan Lingtian's hands earlier galloped his horse to chase up to Duan Lingtian's group, and a young man in luxurious clothes that was a little over 30 sat on the horse by his side. The young man in luxurious clothes had a chilly and emotionless expression, and he imperceptibly exuded pressure onto others. Behind him was another old man that was more than 70, and the old man had an expressionless face as he followed behind the young man like a shadow. In the blink of an eye, the 2 young men and old man had galloped over to obstruct the front of Duan Lingtian's group of 4 and stopped their passage. Meanwhile, many people that were passing stopped and watched from the sidelines. "It's the Su clan's 3rd young master." Many people recognized the young man in luxurious clothes. The Su clan's 3rd young master. Duan Lingtian's calm gaze descended onto the young man in luxurious clothes, and the corners of his mouth suddenly curled into an arc that was filled with coldness. He didn't expect that the young man in embroidered clothes who he'd just taught a lesson would actually be related to the Su clan. Presently, the young man in embroidered clothes had an expression filled with complacency when he saw the bystanders had recognized the young man in luxurious clothes, and then he sat on the tall horse as she looked down at Duan Lingtian. "Kid, you actually dared hit me. You're dead." When he spoke up to hear, the young man in embroidered clothes looked at Feng Tianwu who was by Duan Lingtian's side, and he changed the topic. "Of course, if she's willing to be my 3rd concubine, then I wouldn't mind allowing you to survive and only crippling your cultivation. You're courting death." Feng Tianwu's gaze went cold and was about to make a move and exterminate this detestable young man. But a tall figure had suddenly stood before her, causing her to temporarily stop any intention to make a move. "Only crippling my cultivation?" Duan Lingtian, who'd taken a stride forward to stand before Feng Tianwu, sized up the young man with interest as a ridiculing smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. "So in this way, you're considered to be showing mercy?" Of course. The young man seemed to have not realized the danger had descended, and he raised his head proudly. "If it wasn't because of her, I'd surely tear you into pieces and feed you to dogs. I hope your Su clan can give me a satisfactory explanation, otherwise, I can only have a chat with Su Boya myself." The ridiculing smile on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth grew deeper as his gaze turned suddenly to descend onto the old man that followed behind the other young man in luxurious clothes. The old man couldn't help but rub his eyes when he saw Duan Lingtian, as he seemed to want to confirm as he was seeing things. In the blink of an eye, Duan Lingtian had suddenly spoken such words, and coupled with Duan Lingtian looking at him, he'd completely confirmed it. "It's really him." The old man's heart shuddered. He'd once seen this violet-clothed young man many years ago, as at that time, he was following behind the Su clan's patriarch Su Boya. But compared to all those years ago, the violet-clothed young man had lost the immaturity on his face and had a sense of experience, and he gave people a feeling of maturity and stability. It was precisely because of this that he didn't confirm Duan Lingtian's identity at the first possible moment. Now, when Duan Lingtian suddenly spoke like this and looked at him, he knew that Duan Lingtian remembered him and had recognized him. "Who are you? You actually call my father by his name?" The young man in luxurious clothes frowned as he looked at Duan Lingtian and asked with a low voice. "3rd young master." Meanwhile, the old man behind the young man became anxious as he hurriedly said via voice transmission, he's Commander Duan. Commander Duan? Which Commander Duan? The young man frowned. Embroidered uniform guard. The old man took a deep breath before slowly sending a voice transmission with these 3 words. Embroidered uniform guard. Commander Duan. When the young man heard the words embroidered uniform guard, his heart couldn't help but jerk, and when he connected the embroidered uniform guard with Commander Duan, his expression went pale. It's him. It's actually him. Didn't he leave just 4 years ago? Why has he returned? Even though he hadn't seen this person with his own 2 eyes in the past, but the reputation of the person before him was something that reverberated like thunder within his ears. It was even to the extent that even if this person were to kill him on the streets, his clan wouldn't dare take revenge for him. Even his father, the Su clan's patriarch, wouldn't dare hold resentment against Duan Lingtian. What a joke! Besides possessing a peerless and monstrous natural talent in the martial Tao and an extremely shocking background, the person before him was also the disciple of a formidable sect of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Kid, you actually dare call my uncle by his name? You're courting death. Suddenly, a grim shout resounded out, and it caused the expression of the young man in luxurious clothes to darken. Whoosh! Practically at the instant the young man in embroidered clothes finished speaking, the young man in luxurious clothes had already swung a slap over, and it left behind a red mark on the young man's face with a slap. The young man in embroidered clothes was stunned. The bystanders in the surroundings were stunned as well. What exactly is going on? Feng Tianwu, Feng Wudao, and Elder Kong was shocked by the scene before them. Cousin brother, you've hit the wrong person. It's him, it's he who called uncle by his name. The young man shook his slightly dazed head as he looked at the young man in luxurious clothes and spoke anxiously. Slap, but he hadn't finished speaking when another slap struck him. Cousin brother, the young man in embroidered clothes was slightly sober now and realized that he might have gotten into trouble, and he didn't have the time to ask about it before he was raised up like a hawk carrying a chick and thrown of the horse's back by the young man in luxurious clothes. Subsequently, the young man in luxurious clothes descended from the horse as well. Kneel. The gaze of the young man in luxurious clothes went cold when he saw the young man in embroidered clothes that had fallen on the ground in a sorry state intended to stand up, and he kicked out to make the young man in embroidered clothes to fall before Duan Lingtian's feet. Cousin brother, the young man in embroidered clothes lay prone with his face touching the ground and was in a hideous state from his fall, and he turned around and seemed to want to ask something. Slap. Another slap swung over and caused his face to swell up. Kneel. This time, the young man had been beaten to the point of completely sobering up, and he realized that he might have caused an extremely great disaster. Even though he was unwilling in his heart, he still knelt obediently on the ground. Right when the young man in embroidered clothes felt injustice in his heart and didn't know what had happened. He saw to his shock that his cousin brother, the 3rd young master of the Su clan and the next inheritor of the position as Su clan's patriarch, had actually bowed before the violet-clothed young man that he threatened to tear apart earlier. Commander Duan. After the young man bowed, he saluted Duan Lingtian respectfully. Commander Duan. The young man in embroidered clothes was stunned when he heard what the young man in luxurious clothes said, and then he couldn't help but say in a low voice. Cousin brother, you've mistaken him for someone else. As far as he was concerned, when had the Crimson Sky Kingdom had such a young commander? Slap. Another slap descended and struck the young man in embroidered clothes to the point he felt dizzy and his vision blurred. I'll tear your mouth apart if you speak out of turn again. The young man in luxurious clothes' voice sounded out, and it scared the young man in embroidered clothes to the point of obediently shutting up, and his heart was instead filled with terror. Who exactly is this fellow? Why is even cousin brother afraid of him? You're Su Bo Ya's son. Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at the young man in luxurious clothes. 732 Chapter 733, Gone Far Away. Yes, the young man in luxurious clothes nodded hurriedly as he said with respect and reverence, Commander Duan, I'm the 3rd son of the Su clan's patriarch, Su Bo Ya, I'm called Soaring. I remember now, he's the commander of our Crimson Sky Kingdom's embroidered uniform guard from all those years ago, Duan Lingtian. Someone amongst the crowd of spectators in the surroundings shouted out. His words were like a fuse that caused the entire crowd to burst into an uproar. I remember now as well, Commander Duan is the #1 genius in the martial Tao in the history of our Crimson Sky Kingdom, and he even led our Crimson Sky Kingdom's army to conquer the Southern Champion Kingdom's southern barbaric city without a single casualty. Now that you said that, I recall it as well. When Commander Duan led the army to conquer the southern barbaric city, I was only 15. I never imagined that Commander Duan was still so young after so many years. HMPH. Don't forget that when Duan Lingtian led the army to conquer the southern barbaric city all those years ago, he himself was only a little fellow at the age of around 20 years old. Commander Duan is my idol. I never imagined that I would have the chance to meet my idol today. I have no more regrets in my life. The surrounding spectators discussed animatedly. Numerous scorching gazes descended onto Duan Lingtian in unison. All those years ago, Duan Lingtian was a figure that was like the sun in the midday sky in the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Not only was his natural talent capable of being considered to be peerless, even his ability in military strategy was something no one could compare to. During that time, Duan Lingtian could be said to be a flag of the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Duan Lingtian, he's Duan Lingtian. The young man in embroidered clothes that knelt on the floor had raised his head at this moment, and when he looked at Duan Lingtian once again, there wasn't any arrogance on his face any longer, only terror and astonishment remained. This name, Duan Lingtian, wasn't the slightest bit unfamiliar to him. It was even to the extent that when Duan Lingtian's name had shaken the entire Crimson Sky Kingdom, he who was young had once taken Duan Lingtian to be his idol, and he was fervent towards Duan Lingtian for a period of time. After many years passed and growing day by day, this portion of his memories had been buried within the depths of his heart. Now, his idol from all those years ago stood before him and had been humiliated like that by him. He even had the intention to die in his heart. What kind of explanation do you plan to give me and my friend for today's matter? If you're unable to make a decision, I can go have a nice chat with your father. Duan Lingtian looked at Soaring and asked indifferently. Soaring took a deep breath when he heard this. Commander Duan, don't worry. I'll give you an explanation that you'll be satisfied with. There's no need to trouble my father with this matter. As soon as he finished speaking, Soarang's leg kicked out like a bolt of lightning, and it tapped onto the location of the dantian of the young man in embroidered clothes that knelt on the ground. Bang! An enormous band sounded out as milky white origin energy surged out and drained from the dantian of the young man, and his entire body was kicked flying like an arrow, leaving the bow to once again fall flat on the ground with his face pressed onto the ground. His cultivation had been directly crippled. Cousin brother, you crippled my cultivation. The young man let out a pained shrill cry, and then he forcefully endured the pain that came from his dantian as he stared resentfully at Soaring and shouted out grievously. But Soaring paid no attention to him instead, and he looked at Duan Lingtian as he said respectfully and reverently, Commander Duan, are you satisfied with my handling of the matter? If you're not satisfied, I'll kill him right now. Soarang's tone was cold and indifferent, and his words seemed as if he wasn't the slightest bit related to the young man in embroidered clothes. It was difficult to imagine that Soaring and this young man in embroidered clothes were actually cousin brothers. You're very good. At least, as far as I'm concerned, you're much better than Su Boya. Duan Lingtian glanced deeply at Soaring, and he couldn't help but slightly admire Soarang's resoluteness in his heart. After all, that was his cousin brother. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. Disregarding Soarang's ability in any other aspect, merely his methods of dealing with danger was sufficient to cause admiration in others. The matter today seemed simple and was only a good-for-nothing disciple causing trouble, yet if thought about deeply, it wasn't the slightest bit difficult for him to annihilate the Su clan with his current strength and background, whereas, at this critical moment, Soaring had made the choice of making a minor sacrifice to save the interests of the clan, and it showed that he was an extremely calm and able person. Commander Duan, you're too kind. Soarang's expression remained unchanged when he was praised by Duan Lingtian. Then Commander Duan, what's your opinion? My friend's opinion is my opinion. Duan Lingtian shrugged and took a step back, moved out of Feng Tianwu's way. Meanwhile, Soaring looked at Feng Tianwu, and his eyes revealed a trace of surprise, yet he didn't dare take another look and slightly lowered his head. His heart was filled with shock. According to his knowledge, Duan Lingtian was the person Princess Bai Yao had feelings for. Besides that, the sister of the #1 expert in the younger generation of the Xiao clan, Xiao Yu, a young woman that possessed an appearance equal to Princess Bai Yao, seemed to have eyes only for Duan Lingtian as well. He'd seen both Princess Bai Yao and Xiao Yu's sister in the past, and he'd taken them to be goddesses, causing him to feel as if it was probably difficult to find a woman that was more beautiful than them in the world. Yet now, the young woman before him had instead caused him to realize how mistaken his thoughts at that time were. Not only was the appearance of this young woman in red clothes equal to Princess Bai Yao and Xiao Yu's sister, her temperament surpassed them. He felt the temperament of this red-clothed young girl before him was even more noble and elegant than Princess Bai Yao. Tian Wu, how do you want to punish him? Duan Ling Tian revealed a warm smile when facing Feng Tian Wu. Feng Tian Wu shook her head. Big brother Duan, since his cultivation has already been crippled, then let's just leave it at this. Obviously, Feng Tian Wu didn't intend to pursue the matter further. FC King, come over and apologize. Su Rang couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he heard Feng Tian Wu. Even though he would choose to cut his losses quickly and kill his cousin brother with his own two hands as a last resort, if it wasn't necessary, he still hoped that his cousin brother could live on. No matter what, the young man was his cousin brother, the cousin brother that had followed behind him since a young age, and they possessed a deep relationship. Meanwhile, the young man in embroidered clothes that was crippled seemed to have realized that danger had vanished, and he didn't dare dally when he heard Su Rang and hurriedly dragged his injured body over to kneel before Feng Tian Wu. Slap, 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 comma. The young man in embroidered clothes raised his hands before slapping himself from both left and right, and he said as he hit himself, "Thank you, young miss, for sparing my life. Thank you, young miss, for sparing my life." Feng Tian Wu glared at the young man in embroidered clothes with detest, and then her gaze quickly turned to Duan Ling Tian and smiled lightly. Big brother Duan, let's go. Her heart was filled with warmth when Duan Ling Tian stood out for her like this. Okay. Duan Ling Tian nodded, and then he vanished at the end of the street with the three Feng clan members under the respectful gazes of Su Rang and the others. Enough, he's gone. When he saw Duan Ling Tian's figure vanish before his eyes yet the young man in embroidered clothes was still slapping himself, Su Rang frowned and stopped the young man. I know you're angry with me in your heart, but I want to tell you that you'd either have your cultivation crippled or die today. I was only gambling earlier, hoping that your cultivation would be able to press down Duan Ling Tian's rage. Su Rang looked at his cousin brother and sighed. Don't blame me. The young man in embroidered clothes nodded stiffly and said bitterly, Cousin brother, I understand. Today's incident was indeed something that I brought upon myself. It's good that you understand. Su Rang nodded, and then his gaze flashed. I never imagined that Duan Ling Tian had returned again. When Duan Ling Tian brought the three Feng clan members to his own courtyard house, he only saw a few familiar faces, and all of them were those servant girls that followed by Jingru's side. Young master. The servant girls were slightly excited when they saw Duan Ling Tian once more. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled to her before asking, why is it only the few of you? Where's my father, mother, and Jingru? Young master, they left with Jingru 2 years ago. Jingru asked us to stay behind and wait for you to return so that we can tell this matter to you, said one of the servant girls. Young master, your father asked us to tell you that he left something for you with the divine might marquee, and he asked you to go get it yourself, said another servant girl. They're gone. 2 years ago. Duan Ling Tian frowned. Have my father and mother returned during these past 2 years? No. The servant girls shook their heads. 2 years ago, when the madam and lord took Jingru, young Miss Xiaolan, and Princess Bai Yao and left, they seemed to have gone far away and didn't say when they would return. Xiaolan and Princess Bai Yao were taken away as well. Duan Ling Tian's expression froze and slightly felt his head ache. What do mother and father want to do? Can't they go relax by themselves? Why did they bring Xiaolang and Bai Yao along? Aren't they just intentionally making others misunderstand? Duan Ling Tian was slightly speechless. He wasn't really disappointed for being unable to see his parents when he came back this time, and he even felt slight joy. Of course, the reason he felt fortunate was because of Feng Wudao, who followed behind him. Feng Wudao had followed him this time precisely for the sake of meeting his parents. As for the reason, he knew clearly in his heart, it was none other than for the sake of the matter between him and Tian Wu. As expected, a trace of disappointment flashed past Feng Wudao's eyes when he heard Duan Ling Tian's parents had gone far away, and he sighed. Looks like we've come at the wrong time. You'll have a chance to meet in the future. Duan Ling Tian smiled, but his current smile seemed fake no matter how one looked at it. Kid, you're surely looking forward to me being unable to meet your parents, right? Feng Wudao glanced deeply at Duan Ling Tian, and he seemed as if he'd see through Duan Ling Tian's thoughts. No. Duan Ling Tian smiled embarrassedly, and then he didn't continue on this and instructed the servant girls. Go prepare a room for each of these 3 guests. Yes. The 3 servant girls replied before helping Feng Wudao's group of 3 prepare rooms for each of them in a short moment. Uncle Feng, Tian Wu, Elder Kong, since the room is ready, all of you can go rest. I still have some matters to attend to and have to make a trip. Duan Lingtian stood up in the pergola at the rear courtyard and notified Feng Wudao's group of 3 before leaving his courtyard house. 733 Chapter 734, Second-Rate Sect. Duan Lingtian walked towards the Divine Might Marquis estate after leaving his own courtyard house. He didn't forget what the servant girl had said to him earlier. Father left something behind for me with Uncle Ni. Under his curiosity, Duan Lingtian arrived at the Divine Might Marquis estate. Even though the guards before the entrance of the Divine Might Marquis estate were unfamiliar faces, after Duan Lingtian indicated his identity and they found some senior guards to prove it, they respectfully and reverently greeted Duan Lingtian in. You can get back to your duties, I'll go find Uncle Ni myself. When he saw the audience hall was completely empty, Duan Lingtian spoke out to the guard that led him in before heading alone towards the courtyard where the Divine Might Marquis, Ni Yuan, lived. When he'd just arrived outside the courtyard, Duan Lingtian heard familiar voices coming from within. But this voice was slightly low and heavy at this moment. Father, if worst comes to worst, just ask Mother to not be that sect's leader. She's already old, it's just nice for her to return and enjoy the happiness of leisure and spend time with her grandson. Duan Lingtian was able to discern that this was exactly the voice of his Uncle Ni. Uncle Ni seems to be extremely angry. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he pondered about what Ni Yuan said. Uncle Ni's mother is a sect's leader. Could it be that the sect she's from is a sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom? Even though Duan Lingtian had never met Ni Yuan's mother, but he'd heard of her. All those years ago when he'd just arrived at the imperial city of the Crimson Sky Kingdom and arrived at the Divine Might Marquis estate for the first time, he'd come for the sake of curing the Dark Nether Mink's poison for the senior Marquis. Before the poison was cured, Duan Lingtian had heard the senior Marquis mention that the reason he'd been infected with the poison of the Dark Nether Mink was for the sake of obtaining a spirit fruit guarded by the Dark Nether Mink, whereas, that spirit fruit was something his wife, the mother of the Divine Might Marquis, Ni Yuan, required. If she was unable to obtain the spirit fruit, then his wife would be in great trouble. At that time, Duan Lingtian knew that the wife of the senior Marquis was still alive, but she wasn't in the Crimson Sky Kingdom. When he heard Ni Yuan now, he guessed that Ni Yuan's mother ought to be the sect leader of a sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom or another imperial kingdom. As for an empire or the Darken Dynasty, Duan Lingtian didn't dare imagine it, as it wasn't realistic. Grandson, Big Brother Ni has gotten married. Besides that, Duan Lingtian caught another piece of information from Ni Yuan's words, and his gaze couldn't help but light up. Right at this moment, another aged voice sounded out. I've told your mother about this, and she's willing to discharge her responsibilities, but those old fellows have instead said that if she really wants to leave the sect, then she must have her cultivation crippled. Not only that, she even has to pass through the most severe trials in order to leave the sect. Duan Lingtian was able to discern that this was the voice of the senior Marquis. Bang! Practically the instant the senior Marquis finished speaking, an enormous bang sounded out from within the courtyard, and Duan Lingtian was able to see through a small window on the wall that Ni Yuan had smashed apart the stone table. They're going too far. At that time when Mother had just taken over the position of patriarch, those old fellows had always been looking for trouble with Mother. They only restrained themselves slightly after Mother consumed the spirit fruit and her cultivation improved greatly. This time, Mother was injured for the sake of the sake, and not only are they not grateful, they're instead forcing Mother to step down. They're truly damnable. Ni Yuan was extremely enraged. Grandpa Ni, Uncle Ni. Duan Lingtian walked over to the courtyard with large strides as he lightly smiled and greeted them. Little Tian, when did you return? The two people in the courtyard were first stunned when they heard Duan Lingtian's voice. Ni Yuan was the first to react, and he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression as he greeted Duan Lingtian in. At this moment, he didn't have the slightest enraged appearance from before. Of course, Duan Lingtian was able to discern that even though Ni Yuan was happy because he'd returned, the depths of Ni Yuan's eyes still contained rage that was impossible to restrain. I've just returned and heard the servant girls say that my father has gone on a long trip, and he'd placed some things with Uncle Ni, so I came over. Duan Lingtian smiled. Kid, if your father didn't put some things with me, would you not think of coming to see Uncle Ni? Ni Yuan derided, yet an amiable expression suffused his face. Of course not. Duan Lingtian hurriedly shook his head. Take it. This is the spatial ring your father asked me to pass to you before he left. With a raise of his hand, Ni Yuan passed a spatial ring to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian put away the spatial ring and didn't examine it closely for now, and he instead looked at the nearby Ni Yuan and the old man. Uncle Ni, Grandpa Ni, you two seem to have encountered some trouble. Little Tian, you rarely return, you don't have to worry about matters. The senior marquis was kind and amiable as before. Grandpa Ni, Duan Lingtian's expression turned solemn as he spoke seriously. In my eyes, you and Uncle Ni are my loved ones, and when a loved one faces problems, I naturally can't stand idly by, unless both of you take me to be an outsider. Alas, how could we take you to be an outsider? It's truly because that this matter is too troublesome, and it isn't something you can deal with. The senior marquis sighed. Yeah, little Tian, don't bother about this matter. Ni Yuan said as well, you rarely return, and you ought to be happy. Don't let your mood be affected by other things. Uncle Ni, Grandpa Ni, just tell me, perhaps I'll be able to help. Duan Lingtian persisted. The pair of father and son glanced at each other and nodded when they saw Duan Lingtian persisting like this, and they started telling the sequence of events to Duan Lingtian. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian obtained a certain level of understanding towards this matter. It turned out that Ni Yuan's mother was a disciple of a second-rate sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom in the past. She became acquainted with the senior marquis while she was young and married the senior marquis, who was still the Divine Might Marquis at that time. Moreover, they had a son together, Ni Yuan. Because of her extremely good natural talent in the martial Tao, Ni Yuan's mother had always been looked highly upon by the previous sect leader of that sect, and the sect leader even took her to be the next inheritor of the position of sect leader. It was to the point that the sect leader even didn't fuss about her privately becoming married and having kids outside of the sect. That sect had an unwritten rule. Without exception, the person that was the sect leader or inheritor of the position of sect leader had to sever all emotional ties and was disallowed to marry and have children. Because only in that way could they guarantee that the sect leader would selflessly offer their entire lives to the sect. What a bullshit rule. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but curse in his heart when he heard this rule, as he felt that rubbish sect was truly too selfish to the point of wanting to destroy a person's life for the sake of an unwritten rule. A life without a companion and without children was undoubtedly an incomplete life. In next to no time, along with the death of the old sect leader, Ni Yuan's mother had become the sect master, whereas the older generation higher-ups that couldn't bear the sight of her had instead made things difficult for her at every corner. At that time, the senior marquis had been inflicted by the poison of the dark nether mink for the sake of a spirit fruit, and it was precisely because he wanted to obtain that spirit fruit to assist his wife in improving her cultivation. After his wife consumed the spirit fruit, her strength rose greatly, and it allowed her to suppress the group of higher-ups of the older generations. From that day onwards, everything had become much calmer. It was even to the extent that those old fellows didn't dare say anything even when the senior marquis went to stay at the sect for a long time. The reason Duan Lingtian didn't see the senior marquis when he returned the last time was because the senior marquis was staying with his wife and keeping her company. Half a year ago, that sect came into conflict with another sect, and Ni Yuan's mother had suffered an injury during the conflict, causing her strength to drop greatly. Meanwhile, those higher-ups of the older generation came out once more to oppress her. When Ni Yuan's mother thought about how she'd given up half her life to the sect yet received such repayment, she felt more displeased the more she thought about it, and coupled with the fact her grandson had already gotten married and had children, she decided to step down and leave the internal struggles of the sect. But those higher-ups of the sect didn't allow it instead, and they deliberately wanted her to stay within the forbidden area of the sect and be the sect guardian. Unless the sect encountered danger, otherwise, she wasn't allowed to leave the forbidden area. Of course, she could choose to leave the sect. But there were two conditions. 1. Her cultivation would be crippled. 2. After her cultivation was crippled, she had to pass through the most severe trials before being able to leave the sect. What are these severe trials? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. Ni Yuan had a gloomy expression as he said, it's an extremely harsh test that only a person that had committed a great crime had to pass through after having their cultivation was crippled. Since the existence of that sect, there hasn't been a single person who had their cultivation crippled who was able to pass through the test. Those old fellows want to make my mother go to her death. As he finished speaking, Ni Yuan's eyes were completely crimson red. Even though he was the divine might Marquis of the Crimson Sky Kingdom, a person that was only below the Emperor and above all, yet he was unable to affect the sect his mother belonged to. Grandpa Ni, Uncle Ni, I'll make a trip there with the two of you. After he found out about the sequence of events, Duan Lingtian spoke out to the two of them. Duan Lingtian's words caused both of them to be stunned, and then they shook their heads at the same time. No, this matter isn't something you can deal with. Yes, little Tian, even though your natural talent isn't bad, only a few years have passed. At most, you've only just broken through to the void prying stage not too long ago. No matter how inferior that sect is, it's still a second-rate sect, and there's no lack of existences at the 7th level of the void prying stage there, said Ni Yuan. Even though he knew Duan Lingtian's natural talent in the martial Dao was heaven-defying, as far as he was concerned, only a short few years had passed, and it was utterly impossible for Duan Lingtian to possess a cultivation at the 7th level of the void prying stage or above. Second-rate sect, Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he muttered to himself. According to his understanding of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, a second-rate sect ought to be a sect at the same level at the boundless sect that Shangquan was from. A second-rate sect didn't possess a martial artist at the void initiation stage. A sect like this was really nothing to the current Duan Lingtian. After all, he stood at a different height. Uncle Ni, Grandpa Ni, do the two of you believe in me? When Duan Lingtian saw the two of them were unwilling to allow him to lend a hand no matter what, his face sank as he asked with a solemn voice. In the end, both of them were helpless and could only go along with Duan Lingtian. I'll take saving Grandma this time as a present to that little nephew of mine that I've never seen. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. He didn't even have the time to go see Nifen and Nifeng's child when he visited the Divine Might Marquis estate this time before hurriedly leaving with Ni Yuan and the senior Marquis, Ni Rong. After he left the Divine Might Marquis estate, Duan Lingtian returned to his own courtyard house, and he notified Feng Wudao's group of 3 before gathering with Ni Rong and Ni Yuan and leaving the imperial city of the Crimson Sky Kingdom. 734 Chapter 735, Flying Rainbow Sect. Ni Rong and Ni Yuan flew in the sky outside the imperial city. At the beginning, they'd intentionally slowed down for the sake of taking care of Duan Lingtian, but along with them slowly increasing their speed, when they noticed that Duan Lingtian followed unhurriedly by their sides from the beginning until the end, they couldn't help but be stunned. Father's cultivation is at the 4th level of the void prying stage, whereas my cultivation is at the 3rd level of the void prying stage. Little Tian is actually capable of following unhurriedly behind me while I'm flying at full speed now, and he seems to be at ease like father. Ni Yuan couldn't help but gasp. Wouldn't that mean that little Tian's current cultivation is already at the 4th level of the void prying stage or above? Ni Yuan was shocked, and Ni Rong was equally shocked. He'd lived for more than half his life before obtaining his current cultivation, yet the little fellow by his side seemed to only be turning 30 in another 2 or 3 years. What sort of natural talent is this? Even if it was within the strongest sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, the Azure Forest Tri-Sect, such a natural talent would probably be at the top, right? Little Tian, I heard you joined a sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Ni Rong asked suddenly. Yes, Duan Lingtian nodded. Which sect did you join? Ni Rong asked curiously. Duan Lingtian wasn't in time to speak when Ni Yuan, who flew on the other side of Ni Rong, had opened his mouth already, and he looked at Duan Lingtian before saying slowly, Little Tian, with your natural talent, there's probably no one in the 7-star sword sect you joined that's capable of comparing to you in natural talent, right? When Duan Lingtian returned the last time, Ni Yuan had vaguely heard Duan Lingtian unintentionally mention the sect he'd joined, so Ni Yuan had always remembered it in his heart. Of course, he wasn't so familiar with the sects of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and he didn't know that the 7-star sword sect was the former #1 sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. But even though he didn't know, it didn't represent that Ni Rong didn't. Ni Rong's pupils constricted when he heard Ni Yuan, and he looked at Duan Lingtian with slight astonishment. Little Tian, the sect you joined all those years ago was the 7-star sword sect. Yes, Duan Lingtian knew when he saw Ni Rong's current expression that Ni Rong had probably knew some things about the 7-star sword sect. The facts proved that Duan Lingtian's guess was correct. Ni Rong took a deep breath and said slowly, according to my knowledge, 5 years ago, the 7-star sword sect was jointly annihilated by the other 3 great sects of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom that formed the 5 great sects of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, right? And the Mountain Split sect seemed to have been annihilated as well. Duan Lingtian hadn't replied when the nearby Ni Yuan was already stunned. Since he was in the Crimson Sky Kingdom, he'd never heard about these matters that were spread and gave rise to much discussion in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, so he didn't know. The Seven-Star Sword Sect was annihilated 5 years ago. Meanwhile, Ni Yuan couldn't help but recall that when Duan Lingtian left the sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom and returned to the Crimson Sky Kingdom all those years ago, it seemed to have been 5 years ago. In this way, Duan Lingtian had returned to the Crimson Sky Kingdom after the Seven-Star Sword Sect was annihilated. This was something that he didn't have the slightest knowledge of. Little Tian, for a time, Ni Yuan looked at Duan Lingtian, and he couldn't help but ask. Is what my father said true? The Seven-Star Sword Sect was annihilated 5 years ago. Whereas, when you returned to the Crimson Sky Kingdom all those years ago, it was after the Seven-Star Sword Sect was annihilated. Yes. Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed as he nodded as it wasn't a secret to him. Little Tian, it's already extremely fortunate that you were able to survive after the Seven-Star Sword Sect was annihilated. Are you in the Azure Forest Tri-Sect now? Ni Rong asked. As far as he was concerned, even though Duan Lingtian's natural talent wasn't bad, yet it was impossible for Duan Lingtian to survive under the siege of the Azure Forest Tri-Sect. The reason Duan Lingtian was able to survive ought to be because Duan Lingtian had betrayed the Seven-Star Sword Sect and turned to the Azure Forest Tri-Sect. Azure Forest Tri-Sect? Duan Lingtian snickered in his heart. It was a mystery what the senior Marquise's expression would be if he knew that the Azure Forest Tri-Sect had been exterminated under Duan Lingtian's hand. What, you aren't a disciple of the Azure Forest Tri-Sect now? Ni Rong couldn't help but ask a step further when he saw Duan Lingtian neither agreeing nor disagreeing. No, Duan Lingtian shook his head, and then he said, I'm still a disciple of the Seven-Star Sword Sect. I knew that you're a good child that knows how to repay another's kindness, and it's impossible for you to betray your sect and turn to the Azure Forest Tri-Sect that annihilated your own sect. Originally, Ni Yuan's feelings were slightly complicated when he heard what Ni Rong asked Duan Lingtian. If Duan Lingtian has really betrayed the sect that fostered him and turned to an opposing sect, then even though Ni Yuan wouldn't say anything on the surface, he would surely have some complaints about Duan Lingtian in his heart. After all, that was a sect that had bestowed favor upon Duan Lingtian. Now, when he heard that Duan Lingtian hadn't betrayed Seven-Star Sword Sect, Ni Yuan couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Little Tian, according to my knowledge, the Azure Forest Tri-Sect has always been searching for Seven-Star Sword Sect disciples during the recent years, and they would surely annihilate any Seven-Star Sword Sect disciple they noticed. Ni Rong had a worried expression as he said, is the place you're at now safe? Grandpa Ni, don't worry, I'm extremely safe now. Duan Lingtian was still extremely moved by Ni Rong's concern. That's good. Ni Rong nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. Little Tian, I didn't know in the past that the Seven-Star Sword Sect you were in had already, then wouldn't it have been extremely dangerous when you participated in the genius competition held by the Imperial family of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom? Ni Yuan asked. 1 year ago, the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial family had greatly rewarded the Crimson Sky Kingdom and allowed the Crimson Sky Kingdom to be relieved of taxes for 10 years, whereas, all of this was exactly because of Duan Lingtian's contribution. Because Duan Lingtian had passed through the selection in the genius competition and successfully advanced to obtain the qualification to participate in the Darkstone Empire's Young Genius competition. What, Little Tian, you participated in the genius competition all those years ago? Ni Rong's eyes opened wide like saucers, and he had an expression of shock when he heard this. Father, it was I and His Majesty that asked Little Tian to represent the Crimson Sky Kingdom too, Ni Yuan spoke slightly weakly. Ridiculous. Ni Rong snapped. What would we do if something happened to Little Tian? Truly ridiculous. Fortunately, Little Tian is fine, otherwise, how could you be worthy of being his uncle, how could you be worthy of being Ru Feng's friend? Ni Yuan was scolded to the point of being speechless. Grandpa Ni, don't blame Uncle Ni, I was afraid Uncle Ni would be worried about me, so I didn't tell him about the matter of the Seven-Star Sword Sect being annihilated. Duan Lingtian helped Ni Yuan out of his predicament. The three of them continued flying for a while before Ni Yuan couldn't help but asked. Little Tian, you went to the Darkstone Empire later on and competed with the group of young geniuses of the Darkstone Empire. What was the cultivation of the strongest young genius that appeared when the Young Genius competition started? Ni Yuan was extremely curious about this. An imperial kingdom surpassed a kingdom, and it was enough for him to look up to, whereas, an empire even surpassed an imperial kingdom, and it was an existence that was difficult to reach for him even if he looked up to it. The strongest young genius. Duan Lingtian pondered for a moment when he heard Ni Yuan, and he recalled. At that time, an existence at the third level of the Void Initiation stage had appeared during the Darkstone Empire's Young Genius competition. He was the strongest existence amongst the 10 people that advanced from the Young Genius competition at that time. As for later on, there was also another existence at the first level of the Void Initiation stage. Third level of the Void Initiation stage. First level of the Void Initiation stage. Not only did Ni Yuan gasp, even Ni Rong had gasped when they heard Duan Lingtian, and both of them sighed with emotion. As expected of the young geniuses of an empire, they've already broken through to the third level of the Void Initiation stage before the age of 38, such natural talent and shocking. Perhaps, after another 10 years when little Tian is 38, you'll possess a similar achievement. Ni Yuan looked at Duan Lingtian and was filled with confidence towards Duan Lingtian. As for whether Duan Lingtian had advanced in the Young Genius competition of the Darkstone Empire, he didn't ask, because it was impossible for Duan Lingtian to advance in his opinion. The Young Genius competition of the Darkstone Empire was already a matter of a year ago. As far as he was concerned, Duan Lingtian was only at the fourth level of the Void Prying stage now, and Duan Lingtian was probably at the second or third level of the Void Prying stage a year ago. It was utterly impossible for someone with such a cultivation to advance in the Young Genius competition of the Darkstone Empire. It was precisely because of these considerations that he didn't ask, as he was deeply afraid of discouraging Duan Lingtian, whereas, since Ni Yuan didn't ask, it was impossible that Duan Lingtian was take the initiative to explain. The group of 3 continued to fly swiftly forward. 3 days later, the 3 of them had left the Crimson Sky Kingdom to enter the territory of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Actually, with Duan Lingtian's current strength, he utterly wouldn't have taken so much time to head to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom from the Crimson Sky Kingdom, and the reason he used such a long time was because of taking care of Ni Yuan. He's maintained his speed at the same level as Ni Yuan, the speed of a third-level void-prying stage martial artist. Duan Lingtian noticed something as he flew in the sky above the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom while following Ni Yuan and Ni Rong. The direction they were heading was actually the direction of the location that formerly belonged to the demonic Lotusblade sect, the demonic Lotusblade Gorge, and it would seem like the second-rate sect Ni Yuan's mother resided in was at that direction as well. On the way, Duan Lingtian had intentionally found out about this second-rate sect, whereas, Ni Yuan and Ni Rong had told him about everything without the slightest impatience. The sect my wife is from is called Flying Rainbow Sect, and it only accepts female disciples, so, everyone in the Flying Rainbow Sect from their sect leader, higher-ups, and all their disciples, they are all female disciples, said Ni Rong slowly. Duan Lingtian nodded, and he couldn't help but be slightly shocked in his heart at the same time. A sect that was completely formed from female disciples was actually capable of becoming a second-rate sect of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. It was truly shocking. After all, the natural talent of female martial artists in Cloud Continent were inferior to male martial artists since birth, and this was an iron law in Cloud Continent. So true experts in the Cloud Continent were normally men. Of course, it didn't mean that the natural talent of all female martial artists was inferior to male martial artists, and it was only in a general sense. There were also many female martial artists with natural talent that far exceeded male martial artists. Not to mention anyone else, Zhu his fiancée Kair had revealed shocking natural talent since a young age, and had joined a great power in the foreign lands many years ago. Presumably, her strength at this moment was even more stronger. It was even to the extent that it was extremely likely that Kair's strength had surpassed him. 735 Chapter 736, The Things Left Behind by Duan Rufang. Even though he was currently a 9th-level Void Initiation stage martial artist and had even obtained the honor of taking the top ranking in the Dynasty Martial competition of the Darken Dynasty, he knew clearly in his heart that the young geniuses of the foreign lands were on a completely different level when compared to the Darken Dynasty's young geniuses. According to the memories from the 2 lifetimes the rebirth martial emperor experienced, not to mention the shocking achievements he obtained before the age of 40 during his second lifetime, even if it was other martial artists, there were many that had stepped into the Void Transformation stage before the age of 40. At the Void Transformation stage before the age of 40. What sort of notion was that? Duan Lingtian didn't dare continue thinking about it. Not to mention anything else, just amongst the people that I know, even though Shui Nai's current appearance is maintained at the age of 15 or 16, her true age is only a little over 20. Perhaps she'll be able to smoothly step into the void transformation stage before the age of 30. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian seemed to have been doused by a bucket of cold water, and he felt his achievements in the past were utterly not worth mentioning before Han Shui Nai. Shui Nai, you really strike a blow to others. Duan Lingtian sighed in his heart and couldn't help but recall that mysterious young girl. When he recalled the young girl, Duan Lingtian naturally couldn't help but recall the three little fellows. Little black, little white, little gold, I wonder how they are now, and if they have entered the extremely dangerous place that Qing Nu mentioned. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian pulled back his thoughts that had drifted far away, and his mood gradually calmed down. Right, that spatial ring my father left for me. As he rushed on along the way, the bored Duan Lingtian withdrew the spatial ring Ni Yuan passed to him a few days ago, the spatial ring his father, Duan Rufeng, had left for him. Hiss. A drop of fresh blood dripped down to establish ownership of the spatial ring, and then it gave Duan Lingtian the feeling as if they were joined by blood. After he established ownership of the spatial ring, Duan Lingtian impatiently looked into the space within the spatial ring. The entire large space was practically empty. Within it was a jade slip, 3 pieces of talisman paper that seemed like the talisman paper Taoists of his previous life used to deceive people, and a tightly closed thick book that flickered with a faint glow. The book was completely jade green with a pattern that didn't have anything special about it on the cover, yet Duan Lingtian had instead felt that the flickering faint glow on its surface wasn't ordinary. It's a voice transmission jade slip. In the end, Duan Lingtian noticed that he only recognized the voice transmission jade slip amongst the things his father left behind. I presume it's the message my father left me before leaving, I wonder what he said. Under his curiosity, Duan Lingtian withdrew the voice transmission jade slip and fused his origin energy into it. Instantly, a familiar voice clearly entered into Duan Lingtian's ears, and this voice was Duan Lingtian's father, Duan Rufeng. Tian, when you hear this message, father has already brought your mother, Jing Ru, and those 2 future daughters-in-law of mine to leave the Darken dynasty. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth twitched when he heard up to here. 2 future daughters-in-law. He's speaking about Xiaolan and Bai Yao. Is this still my real father? He wished for nothing more than to get far away from those 2 girls, yet his father had actually increased his troubles from the side. So how would he face those 2 girls in the future? Wait, left the Darken dynasty? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but gasp, and he was shocked to the point his heart shuddered. Didn't they go out to relax? Why have they even left the Darken dynasty? After recovering from his shock, Duan Lingtian's feelings temporarily calmed down, and he pondered about the scenes after his deadbeat dad, Duan Rufeng, had returned all those years ago. Firstly, his father had returned only after 23 years. Secondly, his father had only vaguely spoken of his experiences during those 23 years. Duan Lingtian still remembered what his father had said that day. That year, I went to the swamp of death to find a serene epiphyllum for your mother and you, and during my journey, an unexpected event occurred. Because of some reasons, it caused me to lose control of myself, and I had no way of returning to look for you and your mother. If it wasn't for the sake of being able to return and look for you and your mother, I would have chosen to destroy myself with him. I would have entirely not needed to have been ordered about by him for many years and linger on alive until today. His evil had already been rewarded with evil, and he had already been completely obliterated. Otherwise, father might not be able to return and look for you and your mother. These were the words his father had spoken to him all those years ago. At that time, Duan Lingtian thought that his father had been trapped and enslaved by someone, whereas, that person's strength was extremely strong, and his father had only just found the opportunity to escape and looked for him and his mother. But when he thought about it now, there were numerous holes in this story. Since that person was so formidable, how could he so easily be destroyed? Besides that, father said that his origin energy doesn't exist already. Because of those words of his, I subconsciously believed that his cultivation has been crippled. After my spiritual force searched his body and didn't notice any traces of origin energy, I was even more sure that his cultivation had been crippled. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian frowned. If father really doesn't have his cultivation, then how did he bring mother, Jing Ru, Xiaolan, and Bai Yao to leave the Darken dynasty? Even if his father had something to use as a means of transportation, experts were numerous as the clouds in the world outside the Darken Dynasty, and how could it compare to the Crimson Sky Kingdom? For a time, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be slightly worried. He was worried for the safety of his mother and father, and he was worried for the safety of Jingru, Xiaolan, and Bai Yao. What's going on? Duan Lingtian was completely unable to wrap his head around the matter, and he gradually stopped thinking about it and instead fused his origin energy a step further into the voice transmission jade slip to continue hearing his father's message. Are you bewildered about why I brought your mother and the others to leave the Darken Dynasty? Are you worried about our safety? If it's this, you can be at ease, we're extremely safe now. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth twitched when he heard up to here. At this moment, he really felt like his father was like a worm in his belly. But he was able to perceive confidence from his father's tone. Duan Lingtian continued listening. I know there are many questions in your heart, but it's impossible for me to tell you now. Besides that, we won't return to the Crimson Sky Kingdom in a short period of time. Perhaps, when we meet again, it will be in the world outside and not the Crimson Sky Kingdom. The natural talent of those two girls, Xiaolan and Bai Yao, is not bad, and if they're polished slightly, they'll surely achieve greatness. As for Jingru, her natural talent is still not bad, and coupled with your mother being used to having her by her side, I brought her along with us. At this moment, I presume you've already seen the two things I've left behind for you. Firstly, the 3 talismans that are stacked together will perhaps be able to save your life 3 times, and the method of utilizing them is to toss out the talisman towards your enemy before locking onto your opponent with your gaze and shouting the word, descend. Talisman. Duan Lingtian frowned. Truthfully speaking, talismans weren't unfamiliar to him in the slightest. Of course, it wasn't because he possessed the memories of the rebirth Martial Emperor, as there was utterly no record of talismans in the memories of the rebirth Martial Emperor. The reason talismans were familiar to him was because they weren't anything rare in the earth of his previous life. Especially in the eastern ancient country that he stayed in, talismans were even extremely common things. I was slightly curious towards those 3 talismans earlier, as they possessed scribbled writing that was extremely similar to the talismans of my previous life, yet never had I imagined that they're really talismans. Moreover, Father said that these 3 talismans are capable of saving my life 3 times. Could it be that those 3 talismans have some sort of profundity within them? Duan Lingtian's heart was filled with questions, and he wished for nothing more than to take out one of the talismans and shout, descend, as a test. But his reason stopped him. Subconsciously, he felt that those 3 talismans ought to not be wasted like this, and it should instead be used in the best situation. Why would Father possesses these talismans? This was something that Duan Lingtian was unable to wrap his head around of since the beginning. Wasn't his father a person without the slightest cultivation? So where did his father get these strange talismans? After all, even if he searched through the 2 lifetimes worth of memories of the rebirth Martial Emperor, he didn't notice any records related to talismans. In other words, the rebirth Martial Emperor has never heard of, let alone seen, any talismans in the Cloud Continent. The scarcity of talismans could be seen from this. Where did Father obtain these strange things? Duan Lingtian didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the 3 talismans in the spatial ring. No matter how he looked at them, these 3 talismans looked like the things those swindling Taoists used to deceive others in the eastern ancient country he was from on earth. But Father ought to not deceive me. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian caught his breath, and he continued listening to the voice that sounded out from within the void transmission jade slip. Besides those 3 talismans, I've left behind an exquisite jade box for you, and you'll know where I and your mother are after you have the ability to open it in the future. Alright, I've almost finished saying what I want to. I'll leave it at this, you don't have to worry about us, we're extremely well. Besides that, I've still not met the other 2 daughters-in-law of mine. Stinking brat, bring them over to meet me soon. The voice stopped here abruptly. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. Based on his father's tone, his father seemed extremely free and unrestrained. This is the exquisite jade box. I thought it was a book. Duan Lingtian's gaze slowly descended onto the thing in the spatial ring that looked like a book. With a though, Duan Lingtian withdrew it from the spatial ring. How cold. When the exquisite jade box entered into his hand, it felt icy cold, and the icy cold feeling spread throughout his entire body in the blink of an eye, causing him to be unable to refrain from shivering. After carefully inspecting it for a while, Duan Lingtian was able to notice a fine split at the center of the exquisite jade box, and it was precisely the split that appeared from the box closing from together from up and down. The message father left behind in the voice transmission jade slip said that when I have the ability to open this jade box, then this and that. Just a jade box like this. I can casually, Duan Ling Tian muttered and didn't continue after this point. Because at the same time that he muttered, his hand already been coiled with origin energy as he tried to open the jade box. But the outcome was the jade box didn't move an inch, and it was utterly impossible to open. 736 Chapter 737, Flying Rainbow Mountain. How can this be possible? Duan Ling Tian was shocked to the point his eyes stared wide open, and the origin energy in his hands swiftly increased at the same time to increase to the limit in the blink of an eye. But even then, the exquisite jade box remained unmoving and was utterly impossible to open. Along with strands of azure energy, violet energy, and earthen yellow energy roiled within the origin energy in Duan Ling Tian's hand, he tried to open the jade box, yet it still didn't move in the slightest. This, Duan Ling Tian was shocked in his heart as the origin energy and concept on his hands dispersed, and his face was covered with an expression of astonishment. When had he seen such a bizarre jade box? No wonder the message left behind by father said that, so it turns out that he knew for certain that I'm currently unable to open the exquisite jade box. At this moment, Duan Ling Tian had completely come to realize the truth. Earlier, he was unconvinced when he heard his father speak like that, and he felt that opening a tiny jade box was as easy as flipping his hand to him. But now it would seem that even if he exerted his entire strength and utilized the quasi-royal grade spirit sword, he might not be able to open this jade box. I must find a time to try with the quasi-royal grade spirit sword. Duan Ling Tian, who caught his breath, put away the exquisite jade box with a raise of his hand. Little Tian, what's wrong? Right at this moment, Ni Rong and Ni Yuan looked at Duan Ling Tian at the same time as they'd noticed the energy of heaven and earth that had accumulated above Duan Ling Tian earlier, yet hadn't condensed into form, and they realized that Duan Ling Tian had accumulated strength earlier. It's nothing. Duan Ling Tian lightly shook his head and casually made up an excuse. I just have some comprehension in my cultivation. Ni Rong and Ni Yuan didn't doubt Duan Ling Tian's words, and Ni Yuan even couldn't refrain from sighing. No wonder you have this cultivation at such a young age, little Tian, you indeed possess exceptional natural talent that's difficult for ordinary people to reach on the path of cultivating in the martial Tao. Ni Rong nodded and indicated his agreement. Uncle Ni, you're too kind. Duan Ling Tian smiled modestly. 10 days later, Duan Ling Tian and Ni Yuan stopped in midair because Ni Rong had stopped before them. At this moment, Ni Rong's gaze descended onto an enormous mountain in the distance. That place is Flying Rainbow Mountain, and it's the location of the Flying Rainbow sect. Duan Ling Tian's brows raised when he heard this, and he couldn't help but raise his head to look over concentrated ly. The distant enormous mountain was like an enormous beast lying there. The peak of the mountain was twined with clouds and mist, and numerous extremely clear multicolored rays of light could be seen through the intense sunlight. The multicolored rays of light turned and coiled within the clouds and mist, and its sea seemed like numerous warped rainbows converged together and gave others visual pleasure. A so-called feast for the eyes is nothing more than this. Duan Ling Tian sighed in his heart. Even though the Flying Rainbow sect's mountain was inferior to the 7 great sword peaks of the 7-star sword sect or the demonic lotus blade gorge of the former demonic lotus blade sect, the Flying Rainbow sect was only a second-rate sect of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and possessing a location like this could already be considered to be not bad. This is the Flying Rainbow Mountain. I heard Mother mention it when I was young. The peak of the Flying Rainbow Mountain is like the realm of immortals in the legends, and once I grew up, I always thought Mother had spoke about it casually. I never imagined that it's really like this. Ni Yuan sighed with admiration. Uncle Ni, you've never come to this Flying Rainbow sect? Duan Ling Tian was stunned. As far as he was concerned, Ni Yuan was the son of the Flying Rainbow sect's leader no matter what, and even if some of the old fellows of the Flying Rainbow sect were against Ni Yuan's mother, it wouldn't be to the extent of restricting Ni Yuan's entrance to the Flying Rainbow sect, right? For the sake of allowing me to not be disturbed by the members of the Flying Rainbow sect, Mother never brought me to the Flying Rainbow sect, and the Flying Rainbow sect doesn't know of my existence, said Ni Yuan. Duan Ling Tian came to a sudden understanding. Not far away to the north of the Flying Rainbow Mountain is one of the bases of the Azure Forest Trisect, the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge. Ni Rong said to Duan Ling Tian, supposedly, the Flying Rainbow sect had a deep relationship with the former demonic Lotus Blade sect. It was even to the extent that the reason the Flying Rainbow sect was capable of occupying such a superb location was because of the protection of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Demonic Lotus Blade Sect. Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed. Actually, when Nirong pointed towards that enormous mountain in the distance and said it was the Flying Rainbow Sect's base, the Flying Rainbow Mountain, he was already slightly surprised. He was surprised that the Flying Rainbow Sect and the former Demonic Lotus Blade Sect were located so closely. He was surprised that a mere second-rate sect like the Flying Rainbow Sect actually possessed a location like this. Demonic Lotus Blade Sect. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth had suddenly curled into a wisp of disdain. Of course, Nirong and Niyuan didn't notice this. Let's go over. Duan Lingtian called out to Nirong and Niyuan before flying over towards the Flying Rainbow Mountain. He didn't intentionally speed up and allowed both Nirong and Niyuan to follow closely behind him. After a short moment, the three of them arrived outside Flying Rainbow Mountain. Once they approached nearby, Duan Lingtian was able to notice that there were numerous mountain pathways that coiled around Flying Rainbow Mountain, whereas, every single mountain path possessed a vast platform on the mountain side. These platforms mostly had some buildings constructed on them, a few of them had a variety of plants planted on them, and there was even one that was extremely empty, yet it was the most bustling of all. The latter was obviously the Flying Rainbow Sect's martial practice ground. Little Tien, when he saw Duan Lingtian's figure flashing and intending to fly out and trespass into the Flying Rainbow Sect, Nirong became anxious. Grandpa Ni, after he was called out to by Nirong, Duan Lingtian stopped and looked at Nirong with a puzzled expression. You haven't notified the members of your sect. It's not too late for us to enter the Flying Rainbow Sect and take my wife after you call over some people from your sect. Nirong said, besides that, remember to ask the people you called over to not expose their identities, otherwise, those old fellows of the Flying Rainbow Sect will surely disclose it to the Azure Forest Tri-Sect. Once that happens, the matter will become complicated. If you and the people you call over to help don't expose your identities, then this matter would only be an internal affair of the Flying Rainbow Sect, and it would be impossible for those old fellows of the Flying Rainbow Sect to ask for help from the Azure Forest Tri-Sect. Nirong finished speaking with a single breath and spoke of his worries. Help. Nirong's words caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to help but be stunned, and then he shook his head. Grandpa Ni, I don't intend to bring any people to help. What a joke. If he had to look for people to help just for the sake of taking someone from a second-rate sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, then he could simply just kill himself. With his current strength, not to mention a second-rate sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, he wasn't even the slightest bit afraid of the Imperial family of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. He doesn't intend to get help. Nirong and Niyuan were dumbstruck when they heard Duan Lingtian. After a short moment, Nirong was the first to react, and he said hurriedly, Little Tien, don't joke with Grandpa Ni at a time like this. If we trespass forcefully into the Flying Rainbow Sect, it would violate a great taboo of the Flying Rainbow Sect. I'm afraid not only are just the three of us unable to save my wife, we'll fall deep into it as well. He could go take a risk, yet he didn't hope that his own son and Duan Lingtian who wasn't related to this matter to take a risk. Joke. Duan Lingtian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he couldn't be bothered to continue explaining, and he flashed out to directly descend to the sky above the extremely vast martial practice grounds on the mountainside of the Flying Rainbow Mountain. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian's appearance from midair drew the attention of every single Flying Rainbow Sect disciple on the martial practice ground. All these Flying Rainbow Sect disciples were female disciples. There were both beautiful and ugly disciples, yet one thing could be confirmed, their natural talent in the martial Dao wasn't bad. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to be accepted into the Flying Rainbow Sect. Who's that? It seems to be a man. He's coming closer and closer. Wow, he's so handsome. Sword-shaped brows and starry eyes, handsome and extraordinary, and with a graceful bearing, good gracious. He's simply the perfect lover in my dreams. You little SLT, stop being HRNY. How could such an extraordinary figure take a fancy to you? He looks to be around 25, yet is actually capable of flying. This represents that he's an expert at the void-prying stage or above. Does our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom possess such an extraordinary young genius? If you didn't say it, I almost forgot that he flew over. His natural talent is simply even more outstanding than the 5 great young masters of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdoms who possess the most extraordinary talent in the younger generation. 5 great young masters. The most extraordinary talent in the younger generation of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. You couldn't have forgotten, right? All those years ago, a figure that's even more outstanding than the 5 great young masters appeared in our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Not only that, during the genius competition over 2 years ago, there was supposedly another young genius that wasn't inferior to the 5 great young masters. Right, how could I have forgotten Duan Lingtian and the mysterious young man, Su Li, that advanced in the genius competition of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom over 2 years ago? Even Duan Lingtian and Su Li are probably far inferior to him, right? When Duan Lingtian had just arrived at the martial practice grounds of the Flying Rainbow sect, he'd heard a wave of bubbling discussions. As he looked at the group of Flying Rainbow sect's female disciples that whispered to each other, there were some that even cast flirtatious looks at him, causing him to be unable to help but be slightly embarrassed. As the saying went, 3 women can make a movie. With so many women gathered together, he felt his ears were on the verge of exploding. Swoosh, swoosh. Meanwhile, Nirong and Ni Yuan followed over to stand on both sides of Duan Lingtian. Isn't he the husband of the sect leader? Suddenly, someone stared at Nirong and cried out in astonishment. The sect leader's husband, that guest that stayed in our Flying Cloud Pavilion earlier. Didn't he leave our Flying Rainbow sect because the Supreme Elder put pressure on the sect leader? Why has he returned? These 2 people by his side wouldn't be the help he called over, right? Many Flying Rainbow sect disciples whispered in discussion. I heard that besides asking the sect leader to step down, the Supreme Elder even asked the sect leader to enter the forbidden area and cultivate silently, and be completely cut off from the outside world. Looks like the sect leader's husband has brought help over to take the sect leader away. A few older Flying Rainbow sect disciples hurriedly turned around and left. Obviously, they went to inform the higher-ups of the sect. 737 Chapter 738, In Confrontation. Little Tian, Nirong and Ni Yuan looked at Duan Lingtian at the same time, and the space between their brows contained dense worry. Grandpa Ni, Uncle Ni, don't worry. Duan Lingtian indicated for them to be at ease with his gaze. But even then, Nirong and Ni Yuan still didn't have the slightest confidence in their hearts. They were utterly unable to wrap their heads around why Duan Lingtian would be so brazen to actually trespass forcefully into the Flying Rainbow sect. It wasn't that they'd never thought that perhaps Duan Lingtian's current strength was already sufficient to suppress all those old fellows of the Flying Rainbow sect, so he dared act in this way. But with a quick thought, it seemed to be a slightly wishful thought. How old was Duan Lingtian? Even if his natural talent was any higher, would he who was far from being at the age of 30 be able to possess a cultivation at the 7th level of the void prying stage or above? As far as they were concerned, this was extremely unrealistic. Under the perturbed feelings of Nirong and Ni Yuan, numerous swift howls of the wind sounded out from the distant sky. After a short moment, 3 figures had finally appeared before Duan Lingtian's group of 3. These were 3 old women past the age of 70, one wore azure clothed, the other blue clothed, and the last wore yellow clothes. Supreme Elder, the crowd of Flying Rainbow sect disciples on the martial practice grounds bowed to the 3 old women. The 3 old women were precisely the 3 Supreme Elders of the Flying Rainbow sect. According to rumor, all 3 of them were existences at the 7th level of the void prying stage or above. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 3 old women stood in midair not far away from Duan Lingtian's group of 3, and their gazes locked onto Nirong at the first possible moment. Because they only knew Nirong amongst the 3 people before them. Looks like you really didn't take our words seriously. I remember that I reminded you before you left the last time that if you dared take a single step into our Flying Rainbow sect again, then I'd surely cripple your cultivation. The azure-clothed old woman's gaze were like blades as she stared fixedly at Nirong and spoke with a low voice. Nirong's face sank slightly, and he was angered to the point his body trembled. At this moment, he only hated himself for being too weak. If his strength was stronger than this old fellow, he'd make a move to teach the old fellow a lesson long ago. Why would he have to suffer humiliation like this? Old fellow, you're courting death. Nirong was willing to endure silently, but it didn't mean that Ni Yuan was willing as well, and when he heard someone saying they wanted to cripple his own father's cultivation, how could Ni Yuan continue looking on coldly from the side? After he shouted out with a grim voice, his fierce gaze locked onto the old woman in azure clothes, and he was ready to attack at any moment. The azure-clothed old woman's face instantly sank when she heard Ni Yuan's voice. But when her gaze descended onto Ni Yuan's face, she couldn't help but be stunned because Ni Yuan's face was truly too similar to Nirong, and one with a discerning gaze would be able to discern that they were father and son with a single glance. Instantly, the azure-clothed old woman started laughing from her extreme rage. I was wondering who it was, so it's that little bastard from all those years ago. I truly never imagined that the little bastard from all those years is already so old. Are you intending to see your mother for the last time by coming to our flying rainbow sect with your father today? You're courting death. Ni Yuan couldn't refrain himself any longer when he heard the azure-clothed old woman's words of ridicule, and the origin energy on his body skyrocketed and he intended to make a move. But he was instead stopped by Ni Rong. Third level of the void prying stage. Your natural talent isn't bad, but unfortunately, this little cultivation of yours isn't enough when you're facing the three of us. The azure-clothed old woman sneered as she looked at the 4,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky above Ni Yuan. Why are you talking so much nonsense with them? Just cripple them directly. Amongst the two old women that hadn't spoke since the beginning, the blue-clothed old woman spoke indifferently. Her tone was extremely cold and indifferent without the slightest feelings, and it seemed as if she was the judge of life and death that was resolutely giving out her judgment. Even though the final yellow-clothed old woman didn't speak, but her actions of taking a step forward as origin energy skyrocketed on her body had undoubtedly indicated her stand. At this moment, a lifelike ancient horned dragon silhouette had appeared in the sky above the yellow-clothed old woman and coiled down from above. 7th level of the void prying stage. This yellow-clothed old woman was obviously a 7th level void prying stage martial artist. This is an ancient horned dragon silhouette. According to rumor, besides our flying rainbow sect leader, the other 3 supreme elders are also existences at the 7th level of the void prying stage or above. Looks like all of this is true. Of course it's true. I've even seen the sect leader fight, and the sect leader is an expert at the 8th level of the void prying stage. But unfortunately, she's currently heavily injured and it has affected her cultivation. Supposedly, after the sect leader was heavily injured, even though her meridians were repaired by healing medicinal pills, yet her meridians contain a large amount of blood clogged within, and it's difficult to remove. This was the reason that her origin energy suffered an extremely great restriction. The group of flying rainbow sect disciples discussed animatedly on the martial practice grounds. Of course, there were some things that they knew in their hearts yet didn't speak out about it. If it wasn't for the sect leader being injured, would the 3 supreme elders dare be so unbridled? These were the truest thoughts in their hearts. Most people looked at Ni Rong and Ni Yuan with gazes of pity as they knew clearly of the methods of the 3 supreme elders, and they knew that even if Ni Rong and Ni Yuan were fortunate enough to survive today, they would still suffer greatly. What a pity for this handsome and elegant young master, he'd probably going to be harmed by them. On the martial practice grounds, many flying rainbow sect disciples looked at the violet-clothed young man who stood between Ni Yuan and Ni Rong, and their hearts were filled with pity. Even though none of them had ever spoken with the violet-clothed young man, yet their first impression of the violet-clothed young man was extremely good, and they hoped from the bottoms of their hearts that he wouldn't suffer any harm. But they also knew that the matter before their eyes wasn't something they could interfere in. Whoosh, whoosh. After the yellow-clothed old woman, the azure-clothed old man and the blue-clothed old woman took a stride forward at the same time as the origin energy on their bodies rages, and an ancient horned dragon silhouette appeared in the sky on each of them. Another 2 7th-level void-prying stage experts. The crowd of flying rainbow sect disciples couldn't help but gasp. Even though they'd heard numerous times in the past that the 3 supreme elders of their flying rainbow sect were existences at the 7th level of the void-prying stage, but it was only limited to something they'd heard, and it was a completely different notion when compared to seeing it with their own 2 eyes. The 3 lifelike ancient horned dragon silhouettes that appeared in the sky above the 3 old women coiled to bring extremely great visual shock to the crowd of flying rainbow sect disciples, whereas, the expression of Ni Rong and Ni Yuan sank in unison. Subsequently, the both of them looked at each other and seemed to have formed some sort of tacit agreement before taking a stride forward at the same time, and then they protected Duan Ling Tian safely behind them. Little Tian, leave, quickly. Right, leave quickly, we'll stop them. Ni Rong and Ni Yuan's voice transmissions entered into Duan Ling Tian's ears at the first possible moment, and it was filled with anxiousness. Warmth couldn't help but arise in Duan Ling Tian's heart when he heard these voice transmissions. He knew clearly in his heart that Ni Rong and Ni Yuan didn't know of his true strength at this moment, so their current actions were purely heartfelt feelings of not wanting him to suffer any injury. This matter has nothing to do with you. A dignified supreme elder of the flying rainbow sect ought to not make a move against a young man, right? Ni Rong spoke with a low voice. HMPH. Nirong's words were replied by the cold grunt of the azure-clothed old woman. I don't care who he is. But since he dares to follow the two of you to cause trouble in my flying rainbow sect, then don't blame me for being merciless. He's the same as the both of you, he can leave after his cultivation is crippled, otherwise, die. The blue-clothed old woman's eyes flickered with a grim light as she spoke in a low voice. Whoosh! The clothes on the yellow clothes old woman fluttered as cold lights flickered within her eyes, and she instantly locked onto Duan Lingtian. Nirong's expression instantly went grim when he heard this. You call yourselves supreme elders of the Flying Rainbow sect, if it's according to me, all three of you are the shame of the Flying Rainbow sect. Don't think I don't know why all of you are against my mother, it's utterly not because of her marrying my father, but it's instead because in your opinions, my mother seized away the position of sect leader of your adopted daughter. When faced with such a dangerous situation, Ni Yuan completely shed all pretenses, and he ridiculed. In my opinion, what qualifications does that woman who can't even accept defeat have to compete with my mother? Whoosh! Ni Yuan's words were like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. Not only was Duan Lingtian unable to help but be stunned, even the crowd of Flying Rainbow sect disciples on the martial practice grounds couldn't help but look at Ni Yuan. There seems to be some story behind the scenes. Die! Right at this moment, the yellow-clothed old woman shouted out coldly and directly attacked. Her target wasn't Duan Lingtian who she'd locked onto earlier, but it was instead Ni Yuan who'd just finished speaking resolutely. Obviously, she'd turned angry out of embarrassment from Ni Yuan's words, and she'd slightly lost all reason. The Flying Rainbow sect disciples present saw a yellow bolt of lightning flash through the sky, and it flashed directly towards the middle-aged man that seemed to be the sect leader's son. Swish! Right at this critical moment, an extremely swift sword light descended from high above in the sky to obstruct the yellow-colored bolt of lightning that flashed swiftly towards Ni Yuan. Subsequently, a white-colored figure appeared before Ni Yuan. This was an old woman in white-colored plain clothes with a slightly pale countenance, and she obviously carried internal injuries. Moreover, because of making a move earlier, it caused the hand she held her sword with to shake slightly. Mother! Ni Yuan couldn't help but call out lightly when he saw the familiar figure before him, and his gentle voice came from the heart. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as it was the first time he'd seen his Uncle Ni speak with such a gentle tone, and he was able to discern the love and respect Uncle Ni had towards the white-clothed old woman. Sect leader. At the same time, the crowd of Flying Rainbow sect disciples on the martial practice grounds bowed respectfully towards the white-clothed old woman. Cough cough, Supreme Elders, are the three of you intending to kill me as well after you kill them? The white-clothed old woman, the sect leader of the Flying Rainbow sect, Meng Ping, coughed twice and her countenance turned even paler as her hoarse voice sounded out, and it contained traces of rage mixed within. Sect leader, you jest. The azure-clothed old woman had a calm expression when facing the white-clothed old woman's question, and she said indifferently, we just want to make them learn a lesson, and we didn't really want to kill them. Yes, sect leader, you're injured, so you should quickly return to rest. We'll help you deal with a small matter like this one. The blue-clothed old woman spoke out as well. Sect leader, please leave. The yellow-clothed old woman's tone was direct and resolute, and her pair of sharp eyes flickered with cold lights like a blade. 738 Chapter 739, Saving the Critical Situation. What if I don't leave? Meng Ping laughed coldly, and her pale and emaciated face was filled with frightful fierceness. Then we can only offend you. The yellow-clothed old woman took a step forward, and her eyes were like lightning as her origin energy skyrocketed before sweeping out to attack Meng Ping once again. Swish! Meng Ping struck out with her sword. Even though she'd once again obstructed the yellow-clothed old woman's attack, but the origin energy on her body completely died down, causing her to spit out a few mouthfuls of blood repeatedly, and her body was on the verge of collapse. Mother! Ni Yuan hurriedly supported his own mother, and his eyes were suffused with crimson red as he stared fixedly at the yellow-clothed old woman. My mother is currently the sect leader of the Flying Rainbow sect, what should be your punishment for daring to lift a hand against the sect leader? Unfortunately, the yellow-clothed old woman paid utterly no attention to Ni Yuan, and she instead looked at Ni Rong who'd rushed over hurriedly to Meng Ping's side and supported her. I've told both of you the last time, if you dare appear in the Flying Rainbow sect once more, I'll surely cripple your cultivation. Now, will you cripple yourself? Or shall I? Even if she was before the sect leader, Meng Ping, the yellow-clothed old woman acted completely brazenly and spoke directly about wanting Meng Ping's husband, Ni Rong, to cripple his cultivation. Nitrong clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth, and his aged face seemed to be instantly covered in a layer of ice as he stared fiercely at the yellow-clothed old woman. If you don't cripple your own cultivation after 3 breaths of time, then I'll happily help you. The yellow-clothed old woman spoke indifferently. Elder Huang, don't go too far. Meng Ping was angered to the point of spitting out blood repeatedly, and her voice was exceedingly hoarse. Sect leader, don't interfere in this matter. The yellow-clothed old woman didn't look Meng Ping in the eye but instead stared fixedly at Nirong, who was by Meng Ping's side. There's still another 2 breaths of time. There's still another 1 breath of time. Since you won't cripple your own cultivation, then I can only do it myself. After 3 breaths of time, the yellow-clothed old woman abruptly strode forward. Instantly, the airflow in the sky flashed as waves of piercingly cold gales rose, and it blew onto the clothes of the people that stood in midair to the point of fluttering in the wind. The yellow-clothed old woman walked step by step towards Nirong. Every single step she took seemed to transform into a sledgehammer that fiercely smashed onto Nirong's chest, causing Nirong's expression to become even more ghastly pale. Stay your hand. Meng Ping struggled to stop the yellow-clothed old woman. But unfortunately, her injuries were too heavy and even barely standing in midair caused her body to be on the verge of collapse, let alone making a move to stop the yellow-clothed old woman. Swoosh! Right at this moment, Ni Yuan made a move. He seemed to have transformed into a cannonball that shot out in full fury straight towards the yellow-clothed old woman. Futile effort. When faced with Ni Yuan's attack, the yellow-clothed old woman revealed an expression of disdain. With a raise of her hand, her palm swept out, and it seemed like a cattail leaf fan as it descended towards Ni Yuan. If this palm were to strike its target, Ni Yuan would be crippled even if he survived. Yuan. Meng Ping's expression darkened when she saw her son in danger, and she struggled with the intention of lending a hand. But, she was instead like a deflated rubber ball, and her body that was on the verge of collapse couldn't support itself any longer, causing her to crash towards the ground. But the current Meng Ping didn't think about the consequences of falling from such a height as her gaze was staring fixedly at Ni Yuan. That was the child that she'd been pregnant with for 10 months before giving birth to. During these past few years, she'd owed her son too much. If her son were to really die here, then she vowed that the meaning of her living on would be for nothing else but to take revenge for her son. Revenge that wouldn't stop until one party died. Yuan. Never had Nirong imagined that his son would take the initiative to attack the yellow-clothed old woman for the sake of saving him, and his expression went grim as he flashed out with the intention of saving Ni Yuan. But unfortunately, his speed was still too slow. Nirong closed his eyes with slight despair when he saw the yellow-clothed old woman's palm that was like a cattail leaf fan was about to envelop his son, and then 2 drops of tears rolled down. Yuan. Bang. Ah. But, in the next moment, an enormous bang that was accompanied by a miserable and shrill cry caused Nirong, who had his eyes closed, to be stunned. He was able to discern that this wasn't the voice of his son, Ni Yuan. When he opened his eyes, he saw a scene that he couldn't forget for his entire life. Suddenly, a violet-colored figure had appeared before his son. Mother. After Ni Yuan escaped danger, he didn't have the time to think before plunging down from mid-air at the first possible moment to catch Meng Ping, who was swiftly falling, and then he heaved a sigh of relief. After he confirmed that his mother was fine, Ni Yuan raised his head to look towards the sky, and he looked at the violet-clothed figure with a dazed expression. Little Tien. You crippled my cultivation. Subsequently, the people present heard a cry that was filled with misery and hatred. Then the origin energy on the body of the yellow-clothed old woman's that had been blasted flying died down, and she held onto the location of her dantian as she crashed to the ground. But unfortunately, unlike Meng Ping, who had her son to catch her, she fell fiercely onto the martial practice ground and smashed her head open, causing her to be completely devoid of any signs of life. No matter if it was on the ground or in the air, the martial practice grounds were deathly silent at this moment. One of the 3 supreme elders of the Flying Rainbow sect died just like this. Moreover, she's fallen to her death. Subsequently, numerous gazes seemed as if they'd discussed it earlier as they stretched out from the martial practice grounds to lock onto the violet-colored figure in the air. He crippled the supreme elder's cultivation. I didn't even see how he attacked clearly. Moreover, the supreme elder was crippled in a single move. Even though she wasn't prepared, but it's sufficient to show that his strength is extremely formidable. The Supreme Elder is in existence at the 7th level of the Void Prying stage. Even if it's under the conditions that she was completely off guard, another 7th level void prying stage martial artist might not be capable of crippling her cultivation so smoothly. In this way, his cultivation is at the 8th level of the void prying stage or above. The crowd of flying rainbow sect disciples on the martial practice grounds couldn't help but gasp. This violet-clothed young man looked to be only around the age of 25, yet he actually possesses such terrifying strength. 8th level of the void prying stage. Ni Rong and Ni Yuan looked at each other from afar when they heard the discussions of the flying rainbow sect disciples, and then both of them perceived shock and sudden understanding from each other's eyes. The shock was because they utterly had no knowledge that Duan Lingtian possessed such a terrifying strength. If they knew since long ago that Duan Lingtian possessed such a terrifying strength, they wouldn't have been so anxious as they were earlier. The sudden understanding was because they finally realized why Duan Lingtian had the confidence to trespass forcefully into the flying rainbow sect. It turned out that in Duan Lingtian's eyes, he utterly didn't take these old fellows of the flying rainbow sect seriously. At the same time that their hearts were filled with pleasant surprise, they couldn't help but laugh bitterly in their hearts. To think that they thought it was impossible for Duan Lingtian to possess such a formidable strength earlier. Now it would seem to they utterly could not use logic to deduce Duan Lingtian's strength. As soon as the yellow-clothed old woman died, the azure-clothed old woman and blue-clothed old woman's expressions went grim. The azure-clothed old woman's expression was unsightly as she looked at Duan Lingtian, and she asked with a grim voice. Who exactly are you? Why did you kill the supreme elder of my flying rainbow sect? Kill? When did I kill someone? Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at the azure-clothed old woman and shrugged. Don't falsely accuse a good person. Falsely accuse a good person. Duan Lingtian's words that sounded naive caused everyone including Ni Yuan and Ni Rong to be unable to refrain from breaking out in laughter. Especially the flying rainbow sect disciples, all of them had rosy countenances as if they felt ashamed in Duan Lingtian's place. You clearly killed Elder Huang, yet you dare make an excuse. The azure-clothed old woman spoke with a low voice. Elder Huang, the old hag that wore yellow-colored clothes. Duan Lingtian glanced at the corpse that fell onto the martial practice ground, and his brows raised. I admit that I crippled her cultivation, but when did I kill her? Which one of your eyes saw me killing her? Duan Lingtian's words caused the expression of the azure-clothed old woman to go even more livid. You didn't directly kill her, but you crippled her cultivation while she was high in the air. What difference does this have from killing her? Laughable. Duan Lingtian's handsome face that originally carried a casual expression was instantly covered in a layer of ice as he spoke with a cold voice. She being high above in the air is her problem. Could it be that I asked her to come up high in the air? You can't get through to him, so there's no need to say more to him. The blue-clothed old woman stopped the azure-clothed old woman that wanted to continue arguing with Duan Lingtian, and she looked coldly and indifferently at Duan Lingtian. Who exactly are you? Why are you interfering in a matter of our flying rainbow sect? Who am I? Duan Lingtian looked at the blue-clothed old woman as if he was looking at an idiot. Your eyes wouldn't have gone bad with your age, right? Could it be that you didn't see that I came with Grandpa Ni and Uncle Ni? They're my loved ones, so can it be that I can't interfere in a matter related to them? Duan Lingtian had placed extra emphasis on the words, loved ones. The expressions of the two old women instantly sank when they heard this. They suddenly noticed that the development of the matter seemed to have completely exceeded their expectations, and it had exceeded their control at the same time. Not to mention anything else, just the violet-clothed young man before their eyes obviously possessed a strength that was above theirs. If they were to go head-on with him, they felt that they might not be his match even if they joined forces. The gazes of the flying rainbow sect on the martial practice grounds lit up when they saw the two great supreme elders of the sect being speechless before the violet-clothed young man. More than 90% of the disciples casted flirtatious gazes at Duan Lingtian, as they wanted to obtain Duan Lingtian's attention by this. But unfortunately for them, Duan Lingtian paid no attention to them from the beginning until the end. But even then, they still swarmed at him like a flock of ducks. For a time, the flying rainbow sect's martial practice ground had fallen into temporary deathly silence, and no one spoke as all of them were communicating with their gazes. Finally, Meng Ping, the sect leader of the flying rainbow sect, spoke to break this short silence. Yuan, who is this? Ni Yuan didn't dare dally when facing Meng Ping's question, and he smiled as he said, Mother, this is the little Tian that I mentioned to you in the past. What? Meng Ping's pupils couldn't help but constrict when she heard Ni Yuan, and even her breathing became hurried as she asked with slight excitement. He's the Duan Ling Tian from your Crimson Sky Kingdom. Meng Ping's excitement came from the heart, and the gaze she looked at Duan Ling Tian with was a gaze as if she'd seen some great figure. Meng Ping's loss of composure was noticed by Duan Ling Tian, and he knew that Meng Ping had probably heard of some matters related to him. Perhaps, it even included the matters that occurred in the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge lately. 739 Chapter 740, Kneeling Down and Begging for Mercy. Mother, you know little Tian. Ni Yuan couldn't help but be stunned when he saw Meng Ping lose her composure, and then he asked curiously. Ni Rong looked at Meng Ping as well because he was similarly curious. Duan Ling Tian, right at this moment, no matter if it was the group of Flying Rainbow Sect disciples on the martial practice grounds or the two old women that stood in the distance, everyone was stunned. My God, so he's Duan Ling Tian. Many Flying Rainbow Sect disciples couldn't help but exclaim with shock. He's Duan Ling Tian, the Duan Ling Tian that became famous for his natural talent that surpassed the 5 great young masters of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom all those years ago. The Duan Ling Tian that advanced in the genius competition held by our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial family over 2 years ago. According to my knowledge, Duan Ling Tian seems to be 27 or 28 this year. His strength is actually at the 8th level of the void prying stage or above. It's truly shocking. Duan Ling Tian is the lover in the dreams of many of our Flying Rainbow Sect sisters. I never imagined that he would appear in our Flying Rainbow Sect. The martial practice grounds of the Flying Rainbow Sect became extremely bustling for a time, and many Flying Rainbow Sect disciples cried out sharply with Duan Ling Tian's name. Their feverish gestures caused Duan Ling Tian to be unable to help but feel embarrassed. Unlike the excitement of the crowd of Flying Rainbow Sect disciples, the azure-clothed old woman and blue-clothed old woman in the distant sky glanced at each other, and both of them could see terror from each other's eyes. He's Duan Ling Tian, the Duan Ling Tian that slaughtered all the higher-ups of the Azure Forest Tri-Sect in the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge not long ago. He ought to be a young man in our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom that possesses such a strength and is named Duan Ling Tian can only be him. Duan Ling Tian's current strength truly causes one to be unable to help but feel terror. Even the members of the Azure Forest Tri-Sect probably had never imagined even in their dreams that Duan Ling Tian would grow to such a terrifying extent in only a few years. Instantly, the two old women communicated via voice transmission with each other, and they confirmed Duan Ling Tian's identity at the same time. After they confirmed, there was only horror within their hearts. Perhaps the incident that occurred within the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge not too long ago hadn't spread all over the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom yet. But because their Flying Rainbow Sect was extremely close to the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge, and they were the higher-ups of the Flying Rainbow Sect, so they'd heard about the incident that occurred in the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge a few days ago. The 7-Star Sword Sect's Duan Ling Tian launched a bloody attack of vengeance on the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge. The publicly acknowledged number 1 genius of the former 7-Star Sword Sect, Duan Ling Tian, returned dominatingly and killed all the 6th-level Void Initiation stage experts within the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge on his own. After that, anyone that was already a member of the Azure Forest Tri-Sect before the 7-Star Sword Sect was annihilated were killed without exception. When this news had just reached the ears of their Flying Rainbow Sect's higher-ups, they were slightly unable to believe it, and they'd personally made a trip to the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge because of this. When they saw the crimson-red ground of the northern gorge within the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge and the corpses of all the Azure Forest Tri-Sect higher-ups who they knew lying all over the ground, they realized the rumors weren't fake. The Azure Forest Tri-Sect had indeed been annihilated overnight. Therefore, they'd completely believed the rumor, and at the same time, they feel deep terror that came from the bottom of their hearts towards the person who carried out the deed, Duan Ling Tian. Of course, never had they imagined that not long after the battle in the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge, the unparalleled god of slaughter, Duan Ling Tian, would actually trespass into their Flying Rainbow Sect without any good intentions. There was only regret in their hearts when they recalled their confrontation with Duan Ling Tian earlier. If they knew that the husband and son of the sect leader possessed such an intimate relationship with Duan Ling Tian, then even if the sect leader was heavily injured and even if they still had objections towards the sect leader retaining her position, they wouldn't have the courage to go against the sect leader. At this moment, their hearts were filled with grief and resentment. Of course, they mostly resented their Flying Rainbow Sect's leader, Meng Ping. If the members of your family are so intimate with this god of slaughter, Duan Ling Tian, why didn't you say so earlier? Aren't you just playing the weakling and clearly digging a hole for us to jump in? Even if you want to trap us, you don't have to do it like this. Whoosh! Duan Ling Tian noticed the horror that was emitted from the eyes of the two old women when they looked at him, and he realized that they might have heard of the incident that occurred in the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge a while ago. He knew that the matter he wanted to help Ni Rong and Ni Yuan with today had already been completed. So long as these two old fellows weren't stupid, they would absolutely not dare make it difficult for Meng Ping anymore. Whoosh! Duan Ling Tian's figure flashed to arrive by the side of Ni Rong and Ni Yuan in a short moment, and then with a raise of his hand, he withdrew a medicinal pill and placed it in Meng Ping's hand. Grandma Meng, this is a grade 4 great recovery pill, and it's sufficient to heal the injuries in your body. Duan Ling Tian smiled as he spoke to Meng Ping. Even though it was the first time he'd seen Meng Ping today, since Meng Ping was the wife of Ni Rong and the mother of Ni Yuan, he would naturally give her sufficient respect. Not for anything else, but because of the help Ni Rong and Ni Yuan gave him in the past. Duan Ling Tian had always acted in accordance with a principle in his heart: the smallest favors should be returned a great amount. No, I don't deserve that, I don't deserve that. Meng Ping's face flushed red and she hurriedly shook her head when she heard Duan Ling Tian call her grandma, and then she consumed the grade 4 great recovery pill. Ni Rong and Ni Yuan looked at Duan Ling Tian with a bewildered expression when they saw Meng Ping's loss of composure. They weren't stupid people and naturally noticed how restrained Meng Ping was when facing Duan Ling Tian, and it was as if she was facing an extraordinary and great figure. They suddenly realized that perhaps their understanding of the current Duan Ling Tian was very insufficient. After consuming the medicinal pill, Meng Ping closed her eyes and sat cross-legged in midair to recover. After a short moment, her pale countenance started to become rosy, and her weak aura strengthened ceaselessly as if she'd obtained new life. This is the medicinal strength of a grade 4 great recovery pill. Ni Rong and Ni Yuan's pupils constricted when they saw this scene. A grade 4 great recovery pill was an extremely precious medicinal pill that could only be refined by a grade 4 alchemist. After all, a grade 4 alchemist was only comparatively common in the Darken Dynasty, and they were extremely rare existences even in the Darkstone Empire. As for the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, it was utterly impossible to see a grade 4 alchemist, let alone the Crimson Sky Kingdom. In the martial practice grounds, the crowd of Flying Rainbow sect disciples had quieted down, and the gazes of most of them had shot onto the sect leader, Meng Ping. All of them hoped that Meng Ping could recover and once again take control of their Flying Rainbow sect, and Meng Ping's popularity was obvious from this. Of course, the gazes of a small amount of Flying Rainbow sect disciples never left Duan Ling Tian, and they'd become even more feverish after finding out about Duan Ling Tian's identity. As for the two old women that stood in the distant sky, they stood on the spot without moving an inch. It wasn't that they hadn't thought about fleeing, but they didn't dare flee. Before an existence like Duan Ling Tian who could easily kill 6th level void initiation stage experts, could too little 7th level void prying stage martial artists like them flee. Half an hour passed quickly. Pooh! Meng Ping, who sat cross-legged in midair to absorb the medicinal strength of the grade 4 great recovery pill, suddenly opened her mouth to spit out a mouthful of blood that was purple to the point it almost turned black, whereas, Meng Ping seemed much more spirited after spitting out this mouthful of blood. Whoosh! Along with origin energy pulsating on Meng Ping's body, an ancient horned dragon silhouettes and 1,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared out of thin air in the sky above her. 8th level of the void prying stage. Ping, you've recovered. Ni Rong's eyes opened wide like saucers when he saw this scene, and he asked with slight pleasant surprise. Yes. Meng Ping smiled as she nodded, and then she looked at Duan Ling Tian and slightly bowed. Thank you, young Master Ling Tian, for giving me the grade 4 great recovery pill. Not only had the grade 4 great recovery pill allowed her to recover more than half of her injuries, it even completely wiped out the blood clogged within her meridians. At this moment, she felt her body was light as a swallow, and her strength from her prime had returned. Meng Ping's actions were slightly out of Duan Ling Tian's expectations, and he hurriedly raised his hand as a gentle strand of origin energy shook the air to cause a shapeless force to sweep out and support Meng Ping up. Grandma Meng, you're someone dear to Grandpa Ni and Uncle Ni, so you're someone dear to me too. You can call me Little Tian just like Grandpa Ni and Uncle Ni. I don't deserve to call you that. Meng Ping spoke with slight panic. When she recalled the thing this violet-clothed young man before her had done some time ago, She couldn't help but feel a wave of shock in her heart, and she was unable to recover from it even until now. As strong as the Azure Forest Trisect was, it was actually annihilated just like that at the hands of this young man that was shockingly young, and it was truly unbelievable. Mother, you haven't answered me, how do you know little Tian? The nearby Ni Yuan asked once more. But Meng Ping didn't have the chance to answer Ni Yuan when she was interrupted. Swoosh, swoosh, two swift figures flashed over. Besides Duan Lingtian and Meng Ping who had calm expressions, the expressions of Ni Rong and Ni Yuan went grim when they saw the azure-clothed old woman and blue-clothed old woman flying over. But in the next moment, the actions of the two old women had instead caused them to be completely dumbstruck. The two old women actually directly knelt in the sky before Duan Lingtian, and their emaciated and aged bodies shivered. Lord Duan Lingtian, we didn't know of your relationship with the sect leader, I hope you can forgive us. Lord Duan Lingtian, so long as you're willing to forgive me, then I'm willing to vow under the 9 heavenly tribulation that I won't go against the sect leader anymore in my entire life. I'm willing as well. The two old women knelt just like this before Duan Lingtian, and were slightly unable to speak properly in their anxiousness. They'd completely thrown away their haughty airs as the supreme elders of the Flying Rainbow sect when facing Duan Lingtian, and there was only a single thought in their hearts, I must survive no matter what. What are the supreme elders doing? Even if Duan Lingtian is a martial artist at the 8th level of the void prying stage or above, they don't have to act like this, right? The crowd of Flying Rainbow sect disciples on the martial practice grounds were stunned by the actions of the two supreme elders. Not only were they stunned, Ni Rong and Ni Yuan were similarly stunned as well. 740.